today we have Dr. Darren Kew, who is Dean and Professor of Joan B. Kroc School of Peace Studies at USD. I think Dr. Kew joined us in July of this year, and his research focuses on how conflict resolution and peace building, especially interfaith and interethnic efforts, support democratic development in Africa, Northern Ireland, and the United States. Kew has advised the United Nations, USAID, the U.S. Institute of Peace, and other global organizations and peace initiatives. He has monitored multiple Nigerian elections and co-facilitated the 2023-2024 religious peace building effort in Belfast. His book, Civil Society, Conflict Resolution, and Democracy in Nigeria, and numerous articles have earned him great recognition in this field. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dean Kew.
Okay, thanks, Bianca, and good afternoon, everybody. Well, as everybody, and maybe not in the same time zone, but hello to all of you where you are, and it's good to get a chance to chat with you a bit. So we're talking about the JOB today, and I know that that generates quite a bit of anxiety in folks, and it's oftentimes certainly, of course, a main part of why you are pursuing higher education with us. But I want to just sort of go over some general ideas for you today to say that, this is actually a time of tremendous hope and possibility in our field, particularly in all of the helping fields. But I think in the work that we do especially, there's just a lot of opportunity out there. And certainly sort of technology makes all of us global in many, many different ways. And we tend to think of that in terms of, oh, no, that means more competition. But also it means a host of new opportunities for you. And what I really want you to start thinking about today is to see yourself as a global consultant in our field and a peace entrepreneur. And what do I mean by that? Now, so maybe I should say at the outset that prior to coming here as dean, I was a professor at UMass Boston. I directed a Center for Peace, Democracy, and Development that we had there. And over the years, I've done a lot of consulting with organizations, and Bianca listed a few of those over time. Now, I know you're sitting there, you're thinking, well, wait a minute, you're a professor, you got a PhD, of course, you can do this sort of consulting. But actually, I want to say to you that over the years, I've worked with a lot of folks that have master's degrees, that have even just bachelor's degrees, and they have relevant experience. So it's a time of real opportunity. And a lot of what I want you to think about as we start today is just thinking about how you package yourself. And that starts with sort of three things. First, just think about what you know. Then second, sort of think about what you've done. And third, think about what you want to be. And then based on that, you build your profile. So you are not just Caitlin Smith. You are Caitlin Smith Incorporated. You are Sarah Finmore, mediation specialist. You are you are basically now your own NGO in many ways. And you may think you may think I'm exaggerating, but I'm not. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity out there for folks to sort of build their own career in a variety of different ways. So I never want to hear any of you ever again say that you're unemployed. You are never unemployed. You are a one-person specialist. You are a one-person organization that has a particular expertise. And if you've already taken a class or two with us in any of our different curriculum, you are already more of a specialist in these areas than many folks out there doing the work that we want to do. Now, I'm not saying that you should exaggerate what it is but I'm trying to say that, don't underplay what it is you have to offer. And I want to help you sort of think about, well, how do you build that profile? How do you create Khaner Abdon, NGO or organization or incorporated, however you want to sort of position yourself. If you're sort of more on the peace side, or if you're in humanitarian affairs, or if you're on sort of social innovation, how you want to frame that is your thinking. But the first thing I want to say is wherever you are in your education role at this point, or if you're an alum and you are thinking about your next steps, make sure you have some kind of an affiliation. And you can get affiliations without payment. So for instance, always try to find some way to sort of label yourself. And you have your own sort of specialization and your own sort of consulting outfit. But also if you can find some sort of affiliation that, through an internship, through some sort of work you're doing, work with various organizations and say, hey, can I say that I am an affiliate with you in one way, shape, or form? And as long as you're doing some sort of work, some sort of volunteer arrangement, that provides you with sort of a labeling. And that labeling is really important for you in terms of finding other jobs and careers as you're moving forward. Second is, as you're doing that, remember that you are now in a position to provide free research. And I can't tell you how many activists, how many organizations, how many NGOs I've been engaged with over the years. And the one that always comes to mind was the president of Search for Common Ground, which is one of the big sort of peace organizations in the field. I remember I was at a meeting with him, and I remember he stopped at one point. He said, we are so busy doing what we're doing, we don't have time to step back and actually analyze the impact of everything that we're doing. And I remember him saying, gee, I wish I had a few grad students that could just sort of research what it is, our various projects are doing and just tell us about, what's the impact. And again and again and again, activists, government actors, business professionals, they're all too busy to reflect upon what it is they're doing. And if you can creatively sort of package them, say, hey, look, how about I sort of research this with this paper I'm doing in my class? Or if you're already graduated, go in and say, hey, I've got a little extra time. I'd like to do some research about that, because it'd be interesting for me to learn about what you're doing. And that really helps to open a door with them. And then they kind of owe you something. And if they can't offer you a job, they can open doors with you in a lot of other arrangements. Next, I would say, depending on where you are in your career, if you can go to the field, especially if you're earlier in your career and you have more flexibility on where you can go on this planet. Set aside $5,000, $10,000, rack up your credit cards, talk to your family members, your loved ones. Think about the money you spend sort of per class and consider this sort of your own class and say, okay, I'm going to go to country X or country Y that interests me. And I'm going to go to the field and I'm going to intern with an organization in that country. And it's really, really worth the investment. When I had just finished my master's degree back in the 90s, I know that's the dark ages, but it still works. I've seen it work. I interned with a human rights group. I was doing human rights work at that point in Lagos in Nigeria. And particularly, in countries that are in transition or countries, where folks are struggling to get folks with the skill sets that you have, a lot of NGOs will be very, very happy to provide you, to hire you as unpaid labor. And that gets you the skills in the field, but also if you want to work in New York, you want to work in Washington, you want to work in London, in Paris, you need to get that field experience first. And if you've got that flexibility, it's worth that investment in your career to go to the country that you are interested in. But since you're paying for it, tailor the internship to be exactly what it is. Do that research, find out what are the NGOs that are doing exactly what you want to do. Contact the directors and say, hey, can I intern with you for a couple of months? And I guarantee you, it's very unlikely they're going to say no. But make sure you do your research, find a few organizations so that when you get there in the field, and if you find out, this organization is not what I thought it was, you have a couple of other organizations to turn to while you're there. And also the other thing that's interesting is once you're in the field, when you're looking for internships in Washington and New York, it's flooded with people like you trying to find those sorts of opportunities. When you go into the field, there's less competition. And there's more opportunities to go to while you're there doing your unpaid internship. Go to the various embassies around town, talk to a lot of the expat community, and oftentimes they have need of short-term research that they can pay you for. And the fact that you're in town makes it so much easier. And they can hire you for a short gig here or there, and you can get a little, so you can pay for that internship that you're doing, but you can also begin to connect to the community in the field. And you can, from them, you can start building that bigger network. So think about that. And again, we're here to sort of help you brainstorm about what those kind of opportunities look like. The other thing that's so important about going to the field is building up those language skills. Is especially if you're earlier in your career, those language skills will be what distinguishes you from a lot of other competition in terms of getting jobs. Even if it is in one of the Romance languages, Spanish, French, where there tend to be more folks that have those language skills, there still are less folks that have those languages than others that you're out there competing with. And even better, if you can get skills in languages that there are less people that speak. You know, if you're working in the Caucasus, if you're working in Eastern Europe, you're working in parts of Africa, and you can learn local languages, all the better. That gives you a step up. So try to work that into your career path. And if you're still with us in sort of the master's program, let's think about finding you an internship that gets you there over the summer so you can begin to get that kind of experience. Network as much as possible. I know that's obvious, but I think that, that is a real strength of being in graduate school. Build networks with your other students, build networks with alumni. We have a lot of really interesting, engaged alumni. You're going to meet a few of them today. I've only been here 3 months, but every one of the alums that I've met have said, we would love to help other students in the field. So we can help connect you up. Think about connecting to those folks and set up your own team. Set up your own sort of circle of other students and alums that you are in touch with on a regular basis. Share links with each other, give feedback on strategy, cheer each other on. And if you want to be even more ambitious, set up your own little consulting outfit. I guarantee where 3 or 4 of you are together, you're so much stronger than just one-on-one with this work. And those little study groups that you set up for your classes here at Kroc, those can become your little networking units that can continue afterwards. See yourself as resources. You are resources for each other, and we're there for you to help you. This kind of patchwork of different consulting opportunities, of little gigs here and there, over time will be the sort of first steps that will lead to your job. These kind of short-term gigs lead to long-term gigs. Short-term gigs provide you with more networking opportunities. People get to see you in action. People get to know, she is the expert that does this particular skill set, this particular training. Do not forget about your analysis skills. All this theory stuff you're getting from us. I know you find yourself saying, why am I studying this stuff? That theory actually provides you with an analytical framework that then allows you to do analysis of organizations. And there are a lot more organizations out there that would like to see conflict analysis done, would like to see other sort of analysis of the work that they're doing in the field. That's a big part of what we do. Lastly, let me just make some suggestions of some places to look. I'm going to put in the chat group here. There's one of my favorite online job searching websites is PCDN. PCDN is mine. Others may feel differently. At least, they seem to be sort of the state-of-the-art place to go looking for job opportunities. They have different sections that you can do your search. There are thousands of jobs that are available out there. They have a nice sort of email role that send you opportunities. Check them out. Second is think about sort of umbrella organizations in your area. So for instance, if you're in humanitarian affairs, there's a group called Interaction in Washington, D.C., which is kind of the summit organization that all the humanitarian groups in Washington sort of get together, and their website sort of lists all their partners. That's a treasure trove for you to start thinking about who are the different groups that are out there. What are the doors that I start knocking on? They got a list right there for you. And there are folks there that can help you. And I neglected to mention earlier, another important part of the strategy are information interviews. Is search out these organizations, talk to people that are doing the stuff that you want to do, and say, hey, I know you're not offering a job, but I want to be you someday. Can you take time just to sort of give me some tips? And everybody loves to talk about themselves, and it's a great way to sort of get on people's radars, and they can just tell you. And I tell you again, I've run into so many folks in government, in the UN, in NGOs. They're doing such amazing work, and nobody asks them. Nobody talks to them and says, well, how do you do what you do? They are dying to tell their stories. And once they tell their story to you, you've got them, because now you're a client for them, and they're going to want to help you, and they'll help you along in your career. So think about that. So think about interaction. Think about B Corps if you're in social innovation, the chambers of commerce. These sorts of organizations are really, really important places that have networks themselves. They're networks of networks, essentially, or they're organizations of networks. Check those out. And again, we can help you sort of go that way. Lastly, are the Beltway Bandits, the so-called sort of organizations in Washington, D.C. that live off of government contracts. These are constantly hiring folks in your position. And they have on their websites, they have a place where you can put your CV on their search. And what happens with these Beltway Bandits is USAID or the State Department says, okay, we want to do conflict analysis in Uzbekistan. And these Beltway Bandits jump on it and say, okay, we're going to do it. And first thing they do is they look through their rolls of CVs for somebody who's an expert on Uzbekistan. And then, of course, they have people like me that have PhDs and all that sort of stuff. But oftentimes we're busy, or oftentimes it's a particular skill set, and you may pop in a way that doesn't. And the fact that you're on the sort of younger end of that scale is often really useful for them. So check them out. And I can tell you more about what Beltway Bandits are if you want to connect to me. And that's sort of, I think, the last point I just want to mention is that we at all of the team here at Kroc are here to help support you in this. So our doors are open. When you have questions and you want advice and links up, that's what we're here to do for you. Your faculty, that's part of our job, to link you to folks. And of course, lastly, I just want you to know that as your new dean, my door is always open. I've got office hours on Thursdays at 1 o'clock. I've had like several weeks where nobody's shown up. Finally, yesterday, I had 2 folks show up. I'm really happy about that. So come see me. I'm lonely. Come on and drop by and talk to me. I got nothing better to do but to spend time with you and to hear more about what you're doing. But seriously, I really do want to hear from all of you, and I want to do my best to try to connect to each of you. So definitely drop by or check in with Sarah Wu and get on my calendar, and we'll spend some time and we can chat and we can brainstorm. So let me stop there. I don't know, Bianca, do we have time for a couple of questions, or do you want to move on to the next step?
We are about to break out to the next panel. So I'm not sure we have too many, unless we have just 2 quick questions from students that we can put. Anybody have something off the bat? I want to thank especially our DC alumni I see here in the chat that are providing such amazing resources. Robert, Sarah, shout out to you. Thank you so much of all the things that Dean Kew has been talking about. I also want to go ahead.
Well, yeah, and thanks for putting the NDI's link there. And I want to say, I think definitely apply to sort of the NDIs of Washington, NDI, Search for Common Ground, IRI, all the sort of big organizations there in Washington as your plan A. And if you're able to get one of those gigs, that's great. As you might imagine, they're highly competitive. So my experience with former students and myself as well is that it's better, go to the field first, like I was suggesting, as your plan B option. If you can't get that gig with NDI, go and work in Kenya, go and work in the country that you're most interested, even if it's just for 2 or 3 months, if that's all you can afford with an unpaid internship. When you then come back to NDI and say, hey, look, I was working in Kenya for a couple of months with this organization, that organization. And then also when you're in the field in Nairobi is like chock full of organizations from all around the world. You'll have connected to that whole network of folks, and you'll have all those kind of expats in the field that are doing their work there that then can sort of cheer for you when you go back to NDI Central in Washington, or you want to go to groups in London or wherever it is you want to work for, where it's a highly competitive environment.
Amazing. Thank you, Dean Kew.
And Humanitarian Assistance panel. We have 3 great speakers joining us. So thank you, Jeniffer, Hayley, and Ernest for being here today and offering your insight and expertise with our attendees. So without further ado, the bios were shared with everyone in the chat. And I don't want to go into too much detail that the panelists will share themselves. So I'm going to just turn it over to them. Like I said, we have Jeniffer from Americares, Hayley representing the Geneva Graduate Institute, and Ernest representing Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and is also a lecturer with the MSHA program at the Kroc School. Each of our panelists will have 5 to 7 minutes or so to speak a little bit about their career journey and what they do. And then we'll have some time for question and answer at the end of that. So I think we'll just kind of go in order. We're going to start with Jeniffer, and I see your name is Jenny. So sorry if you prefer Jenny. We'll go ahead and start with you, and then if we run out of time, I'll kind of stop you, and we'll move on to the next. And for the other folks in here, feel free to kind of send questions or anything you have in the chat, and we will have time for questions at the end. Jenny.
Thank you, Daria. I go by Jenny, but I also go by Jeniffer, so it's fine. I am my work computer right now. That's why you see LAC. You're like, what's going on? It means Latin American and the Caribbean. I forgot to change it, so apologies for that. But hi, everyone. I am Jeniffer, or I go by Jenny. And I started my career as a birthday clown at McDonald's. So yes, that's right. I was the one who showed up in face paint, but don't you worry now. I traded the clown shoes for something a little more impactful now. Though I have to say, those days taught me patience and flexibility, 2 essential traits for humanitarian work. But what really solidified my path toward a career in this field was my experience with the Peace Corps in Costa Rica. That's when I realized my strong commitment for community work and how much I enjoy community. Now, between being a clown and the Peace Corps, a lot happened, of course. But that's the beauty of it, right? The theme of this expo is various pathways to becoming a change maker. And let me tell you, I took a very interesting route. But a key strategy, like the dean was saying, I just did a lot of volunteering work. I volunteered my time with organizations I was interested in to learn more about them and myself and build a network. So that's really, really important. And I want to highlight that. But fast forward to today, I'm working at Americares, a health-focused relief and development international organization that improves health for people affected by poverty or disaster. Their programming falls under emergency response, medicine security, and health services. I myself manage partnerships in the Latin American and Caribbean region. And I basically just ensure that vital medicine and medical supplies reach the people who need them the most. We have various partners around the world. In my region, Latin America, some countries are like Peru, Venezuela, Jamaica, St. Lucia, amongst other countries. And those are long-standing partnerships that we have with them. And that is based on trust and just been working with them for a really long time. I originally applied to Americares for 2 reasons. Of course, number 1, that I needed a job. But 2, I was already familiar with the region. But little did I know how much this role will challenge and sharpen me. I really had to learn how to work in difficult global environments, manage a work-life balance, and accept feedback without taking it personally. I also learned the art of providing excellent customer service, which is as important in the nonprofit world as it is in the fast food. So at Americares, I've been able to improve my skills in strategic decision making and attention to detail. And trust me, it is the small things that make a difference. I know it sounds cliche, but it's the small things that make a difference. And I believe that each of us play a unique but interdependent role. Or as I like to say, it takes a village to build a village. So here's my advice for you. You cannot be a change maker without expecting change in yourself. I'm going to repeat that. You can't be a change maker without expecting change in yourself. For example, it's okay if you don't start off as the manager, and it's okay if you don't land your dream job on the first try. What's important, I've come to learn, is being able to discern when to endure a challenge or when it's time to move on. So that's it for me. Thank you. And if anyone needs a balloon animal after this, you know where to find me.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jenny. I think you said some really insightful stuff. I really like that way you ended it about when to endure a challenge versus move on. So thank you, Jenny. Save questions if you have them in particular for Jenny. And we're gonna move over to our next panelist, Hayley Umayam, and I'll let you take it away.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Hayley Umayam. I'm currently a PhD student at the Graduate Institute in Geneva, Switzerland. I'm in the Department of International Relations and Political Science. But first, I'll tell you how I got there, and then I can tell you a little bit more about being a PhD student. So during my undergraduate studies, I was captivated by all things international. I double majored in international studies and French. I studied abroad. I did internationally oriented internships. So I was really excited, but I had no idea what I was actually going to do. I just knew I needed to learn more. And I was lucky enough to be accepted to do my master's at the Kroc School for the MAPJ program. And during that time, I just wanted to explore and see, in this big new field of peace and justice studies, like what can I actually do with this? I tried my hand at some mediation courses. I did an internship with the Department of Justice, and these were all very interesting, but I kept finding myself asking a lot of questions, wondering why we do certain things, why this works or not. And I eventually found a good outlet for all of those types of questions in my research design course at the MAPJ program, where we were thinking about these questions in situations of conflict, post-conflict, and so forth. And during that time, I also began to focus a lot and grow extremely interested in South Sudan, which at the time that I was studying had very, very recently become independent. And a wonderful professor at the Kroc School, who has since retired, Nejla Shergi, saw this interest and she encouraged it. And she actually eventually put me in touch with the person who would become my first boss. So it was really just kind of this organic interest that got fostered that led me to this role. So I took a job, very entry-level role as a data analyst, focused on monitoring and evaluation in South Sudan. And over time, I worked my way up the ladder to eventually be the director of data analysis and synthesis for all of our third-party monitoring in that region, mainly focused on food security, but we covered a lot of ground. And those years were a big reality check in a lot of ways. All the textbooks on research and discussions had been great, but they were quite abstract. So, I had this solid foundation of what happens in an ideal scenario, but then I had to go conduct research in the real world. And South Sudan is quite the challenging context. There's limited road access. There are not really many accurate numbers on the population, not to mention a lack of internet and, of course, ongoing conflict in many parts of the country. So it was a big learning curve. I spent about 6 years working in South Sudan and around the region, getting more and more familiar with the ins and outs, the goods and the bads of the humanitarian system. And again, I started getting very curious. I started noticing some patterns about the way that humanitarian research is conducted. For all this talk about being evidence-based or data-driven, to me, it felt like a lot of good research just wasn't getting used, or that it was simply coming to the same conclusions that had been arrived at years before or even decades earlier. So there was this disconnect that I was curious about. But in the day job I had then, I certainly didn't have time to explore that question in depth. So I decided to pursue a PhD, really motivated by the puzzle that is humanitarian research. How is it possible that there are so many people like me conducting research? Supposedly we know a lot about how to do things here, and yet these situations continue to be bad and protracted even. So what's going on? So that brought me to my current role, which is as a student again. I joined the Graduate Institute in 2020. Just for time, maybe I can say more about what doing a PhD entails in the Q&A. But my day, it's spent mainly trying to set aside as much time as possible, trying to write my dissertation. But I'm also juggling that with teaching commitments, both at the Graduate Institute and in the MSHA program. Shout out to Heather and Anna, some of my wonderful former students from last year. And also, Geneva, it's known as International Geneva. It's in many ways the center of the humanitarian worlds. You've got all of these big UN organizations and agencies. You have the International Committee of the Red Cross, the WHO. So there are constantly workshops and conferences and events to go to, almost too many. Sometimes I have to ignore them so that I can get some work done. But yeah, it's been a really nice balance for me to, I don't know if all of you were in Dean Kew's talk, but to kind of get that field level experience, to really develop a lot of familiarity with a particular context, and then now sit at a more global level and hear about some of these debates and discussions happening at this level as well. Happy to talk more in the Q&A. Thanks, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Hayley. Lots of insightful things to share with us. And with that, we'll turn it over to our final panelist, Dr. Ernest Ogbozor, who's representing both Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and, like Hayley, our MSHA program at Kroc. So thank you, Ernest, for being here.
Thank you very much. And just to say that I'm glad to be invited to join this discussion. And coming from Nigeria, so I'll be talking more of an international student who has been able to navigate the work environment here and now lecturing. Yeah, so if you're an international student here, then you should learn from my, my journey. And again, maybe before I start again, just to let you know that I started working as an aid worker with the International Committee of the Red Cross in Nigeria. And actually, I started a career because of what was happening in my environment. So my parents were survivors of the Nigerian Biafran War, and they survived because of the aid that they received from the Red Cross. So right from childhood, I had that belief that I want to be able to work so that I can also help others freeing violence. So that was my motivation. So after my first degree, just like some of you here that does Peace Corps, in Nigeria, it is called National Youth Service Corps. It's a one-year mandatory service. So I happened to serve with a development organization called TechnoServe. So from there, I was able to land my dream job working for the Red Cross, just to see how I can also help people to survive just as my parents survived. So that was basically how I started my career. And again, it has been challenging because over time, the violence was changing, from political violence, from community kind of crashes to terrorism. So I work for the Red Cross as a field officer in northern Nigeria. And you can imagine managing relief, where terror groups operate. So it was very challenging. Some of my colleagues died from suicide bombing, but I was lucky, you know. And even at some point, my mom said to me, you have to leave this job because the job was becoming very challenging, you know. And I can remember the question she asked me on one occasion. She said to me, why is it that when people are running away from violence, that is when you are going towards the violence? So I said to her, you might not understand, but that's the nature of the job. So, so luckily, you know, so I got this scholarship from Ford Foundation to continue my master's program. So, and that was, I didn't want to leave my job because I was not sure of getting a job if I come back to Nigeria. But at the same time, I risked it. So I went to Massachusetts, to Brandeis University to study my master's in international development. So that was basically how I came to the United States. And my aim was after completion of my program, I will go back to my country and continue my work with the ICRC. I think Hayley talked about ICRC. Yeah, so basically it is based in Geneva, and that's basically where we have our training. But I work for the Nigerian program, Yeah, so after the completion of my master's degree, I was supposed to go back to Nigeria to continue my work. But at the same time, I was not sure of whether the job would be there for me. So what I did was to now say, okay, why don't I stay back to actually continue research and to understand terrorism, Boko Haram in Nigeria, because then it was new. I never believed that a Nigerian Muslim can be a terrorist. But over time, that was the situation. Yeah, so I stayed back to continue research, and that was how I enrolled for my doctorate degree. Then before completion of my doctorate degree, so I started teaching, and that is where I am today. Yeah, so my career has been combining practice and scholarship, and which has been very, very good. Some of you here have attended my class, Anna, as well as Hida. Yeah, so, and even some of you have said that you want to hear from me more, you know, because most of our classes are online. Yeah, so, but that is basically my journey. And I think being able to work on the field as well as now learning more of the theories during my degrees has enabled me a kind of, to be able to communicate better, you know, not just talking too theoretical, but also now combining it with my field experience. So currently I teach in the MA program. So I teach Foundation for Justice, Peace and Justice and Social Change. Then I also teach Climate, Displacement and Humanitarian Action. So these are the two classes I teach at Kroc. But I'm a professor at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. So I joined Embry-Riddle last year from American University. Yeah, so it has been a kind of, I have moved maybe in the last 2 years. And yeah, so I'm happy to take your questions as we go along. And maybe that will be, at least we can better interact then. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ernest. So now we're going to kind of transition into question answer. If you have questions, you can come off mute and share them in the chat, but we'll start with a few questions just directed at all our panelists and kind of go into a discussion from there. So I think kind of first question for all of you, you all kind of touched on this a little bit, and you can sense the passion for your work and what you do and why you do it. And I think that's why a lot of us are, you know, in these programs. And so what does working into your passion look like? What are the successes with that? What are maybe the challenges with that? And how might that have evolved over your career? And any of our panelists, feel free to start with that.
Okay, let me just jump in. Actually, I got evacuated from Florida because my university is in Central Florida. And to me, it affected me in the sense that I was used to working on the other side, helping people that are displaced, you know, but right now I'm the one displaced. So which means that any of us can be a refugee one day. So nobody or an ethnically displaced person. Yeah, so just a kind of, right now, okay, my university just got power, but most areas in Volusia County have no power. Yeah, so, but just to say that disaster or emergencies, is what no one can predict most of the times, and even the extent of the destruction. Yeah, but at the same time, I think being able to work in human-made emergency, which is conflict, which is an area I worked in Nigeria, and now in Florida, where we have mostly natural disasters. That has also enabled me to look at these two types of disasters, not just learning about them, but being in the environment where the disasters happen. And that also, I'm also learning as well as also trying to contribute. And again, I'm working with the Volusia County Director of Emergency Management. He comes to my class to give lectures on emergency management. Yeah, so I think that is the type of networks which I think they didn't talk about, which we should be able to establish, so that some of our students that want to, maybe some of my students that are interested in emergency management, can kind of network with the director of the county. Yeah, so so that is some of the challenges. Okay, some of what I'll add. So thank you.
I can go, Daria, if that's okay. I think to your question, what does working into your passion look like? Successes and challenges. I think when people ask what's my passion, I say community is my passion. I know it sounds weird, but community as the place and community as the feeling of community. And I think, having a degree in peace and justice, also people are like, what? So I think we get used to it's kind of abstract, but in a way, I don't know how everyone here feels if you get asked what's your passion, but for me, community, as you go through life, it changes. And of course, people in a community have different needs. So I've come to realize that for me, I thought on my first try, I get to do whatever I want to do for the rest of my life. But I think there's so much worth in sometimes just not knowing what you're doing or where you're going, but just you have your north, what is that? And then just keep walking towards that. And in my job right now, I feel like because I had the field experience, which that teaches you to be an adaptive person. But being in a work where Americares is such a long-standing organization, there's so much in the background that takes. For example, in my job, one of the main things I do is coordinate shipments, air shipments, and sea containers of medicine and medical supply. And then that shipments goes to the community, but it starts with our team, just the gift team, putting together a shipment. So I think, I don't know, I guess to respond to your question is working into your passion is not as clear as you think it will be, but that's totally okay. And you just have to keep reminding yourself what is it that you're passionate about, and so you can get little nuggets of experiences that you go through your work. There's so much value in learning all the aspects of a community, even if you're into water and sanitation, I don't know, but there are so many needs that a community has, and I think you have to see your passion and as not just as black and white, but there are so many things that surround that you can experience in your career to get to that place. So when you go to that place, you'll be able to handle whatever comes, So I don't know if I answered the question, but yeah.
Should I go or should we take this
I
question?
I saw Julia's had their hand raised, but Hayley, if you want to answer this question, and then we can go over to Julia's question.
Yeah, sure. I don't know about my passion, but I mean I can tell you how I got into working at South Sudan. I mean, I'd been really curious about that region for a while. I grew up in a very diverse community, but I didn't know a lot about the outside world. I had a big international community and family, but from within the US. And it really wasn't until high school with the Darfur genocide that I started to actually encounter the rest of the world in a very serious way. And so I just was really, really curious about the region. And as I kind of continued my college and master's education, like I said earlier, that's when South Sudan broke off from North Sudan. So it was just kind of an area that I had been following and had been captivating for me for a while. So I was so excited to go and actually like work there and experience what life was like there. 2 weeks after I got my job offer, civil war broke out in South Sudan. So I didn't go right away. I actually started my job in Egypt for the first few months, working from there, and was just really excited to finally get to go to South Sudan. And say in terms of what was both successful and challenging, so just kind of following this interest that I'd had for a long time. But it became more and more challenging and heartbreaking over the years as I started to, again ask, why isn't this working if there are so many of us that are trying to do good in these contexts? And then the big kind of dark night of the soul reflections of wondering, I guess, how much am I also contributing to this? I'm probably also contributing to this problem here, was sort of the challenge of dealing with this thorny question of what you want to do and kind of what types of good you want to do in the world, and kind of the harsh realities of navigating how that gets done. It's not always clear and clean cut. So that had been a big learning curve for me, and again, kind of a big motivation for going back to school and sort of sitting and thinking about what I've been doing professionally for the past few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's probably something that we all kind of experience. It kind of like comes and goes in waves as we think about this and have different experiences. But Julius, I saw your hand raised. Do you want to ask your question?
Yep. I think my question will go to both the panelists. When they were sharing, I had something that I was thinking on in terms of emergency management. And this emergency management, I just want their experiences, especially it'd be nice to hear from Ernest, because I think he has both sides of what I'm looking at. How evacuations, issues of displacement are handled locally and even here. Because I think as I'm growing, I think my focus is on return, reintegration, and resettlement.
Exactly.
So I want to see from as far as say like Ernest, from what he has done before, what he's doing now, what's the link, or what are the differences between how he has handled emergency management in terms of resettlements, or assistance, say like in accommodation or food, things like those. Sure.
Okay, thank you very much, Julius. And maybe I'll talk more in terms of conflict, because when people are displaced in a conflict zone, it differs when you are displaced as a result of natural disaster. So what we have in Florida are people being displaced due to Hurricane Helene or Milton, Yeah, but let me talk specifically about conflict zone, which is basically an area that I've worked. So for the Florida, I would say that I'm also displaced in Florida, Yeah, so people came to my aid. Whereas while I worked in Nigeria for the Red Cross, I was the one managing the camps, doing assessment. Yeah, so I think in terms of managing displacement in a conflict zone, yeah, so during conflict, people moved, forced displacement. People moved. And most of the times they move because they feel that their life is not secure. They might be killed, or because their houses were burned. It can be as a result of different reasons. But once people move, so as an emergency officer, what I usually do the first thing is assessment, because you need to understand how many people there, what is going on, even before now saying, what do you do next? Yeah, so I think that is the first point, which is assessment. You need to understand how many people are in the camp, are there children, are there adults, what are the needs, even before even getting to your headquarters and say, this is the need. Yeah, so I think, during emergency, which is basically what we have in Florida right now, because my university was closed, and people, of course, nobody will ask you to leave because we are not close to the coast, but people were advised either to leave the area. But at the same time, again, because of huge number of students, so there was a kind of a close watch, and just maybe depending on whether there are changes in terms of the forecast about what might happen, then that could determine what should be done. Because evacuating a whole school, because you have done where you have students, and some of them are even international students, they don't have anywhere to go, Yeah, so that is a very huge kind of evacuation altogether. But at the same time, if they were close to the coast, then definitely everybody will be asked to move. Everybody will be asked to move. So FEMA officials were around, as well as the state agencies as well, just to help. And there were also vehicles lined up in terms of massive evacuation. So in Tampa Bay and St. Petersburg, so those ones of course, everybody close to the coast were moved. But I was just learning that the prisons were not moved. So I don't know why people in prisons were allowed to stay, whereas others were moved. Yeah, but maybe, Julia, this is basically what maybe we can arrange to talk, another time, because there will be no time to go into deep about how the evacuations were carried out. Yeah, so I'm happy to chat maybe at another point about this.
Thank you. Other panelists, in case you may have a different take on what Ernest has just shared.
Thank you for that question, Julius, and your answer, Ernest. For our attendees, if you have other questions, you can feel free to raise your hand or come off mute or put them in the chat. But another kind of question that I kind of have, I think, for everyone here would be kind of what is your kind of words of advice for graduate students, especially thinking about how to help them stand out in the job market?
I can speak to that. I think I said a little bit of you can't be a change maker without expecting change in yourself is so huge. I think we focus a lot on the academic experience, but emotional intelligence is as important as your academic background. Nobody wants to work with someone who cries all the time at meetings. You need to be able to have that emotional intelligence. And I think, your attitude is huge. I think life is stressful. We all know that. There's so many things happening in the world, and especially working in the humanitarian world. I mean, our team is responding to all the hurricanes all the time. So it's a lot. So you need to be able to have the emotional intelligence to handle those situations, to be able to close the computer and spend time with your family or by yourself and come back refreshed. And you have to learn how to be able to do that. And I don't think there's a quick guide. I mean, I don't know, everyone has kind of like their own journey to that. But I would say if I'm hiring a team, I want to see how their emotional intelligence is, and that you can tell by asking simple questions like, how do you handle stress? You have to be able to answer those questions. How do you handle stress? What do you do when you have a lot of things to do? So I think my advice to you is, how do you handle stress? Do you have an answer for that? And as someone as values relationships, I like working with people who sometimes you don't even know what's going on because they're able to push through. And I'm not saying you don't have to tell anyone what you're going through, but work is work. And you need to be able to be a professional and to have the right attitude and to come refreshed to work, even though life can be hard sometimes. So yeah.
So for me, I think the dean has actually a kind of touch on this. Basically, and again, maybe I'll talk more as an international student because what actually helped me was the skill which I had, having worked on the ground, before coming here. Yeah, so I think that skill helped me a lot. And also, I think the dean talked about a kind of having an internship or a volunteer, because this is basically what will help you, to get connected to organizations that work in the area that you work. Yeah, so I think that is also what helped me because then I consulted for Search for Common Ground. Right now I'm in their M&E roster. And this is a kind of, I do independent work for them. And even when I don't even have the right document to do those things, but because I have the skill on monitoring and evaluation, I was able to win some grant proposal to conduct some research for them, as well as U.S. Institute of Peace. I also work for U.S. Institute of Peace. Actually, after my doctorate degree, I have no full-time job. Yeah, so but I was able to write a grant proposal, and win grants, Yeah, so and that keeps me going. And also during my doctorate degree, I also won a lot of grants because of the skill which I brought. Yeah, so if you are coming from international or from overseas and you have skills already, then that will be very, very good, because you don't need to travel to get those skills again. You have the skills. The only thing you need is just being able to put those skills into practice, Yeah, so I think that is what helped me. Yeah, so network, but we should be clear about our goal. Where do you want to work in future? You should be clear about it, know where to intern, and also know an organization which you just want to get involved in. And learn about the organization and start your networking, becoming closer to people in that organization. And also, we your professors, we also your resources, Feel free to contact us too. And I just mentioned already how I connect my students or how I bring in external speakers, to come to my classes. That is a way of connecting my students to resources that can be useful to them when they graduate. Yeah, so make sure you use your professors. Hayley is here, myself is here. Yeah, so if you have questions about some organization, reach out to us. We can also, maybe we'll have some students that we have taught before that are in those organizations. Yeah, so we're able to help you. Yeah, so just make use of the resources you have. And also Bianca here and Daria, feel free to, feel free to reach out to all of us. So if there's any way we can help you, we would.
Okay, I agree with Ernest and Jenny's points there. I love Jenny what you said about changing yourself and also about stress. In a lot of these roles, it can be very hard to find that golden work-life balance. Depending on your living arrangements and so forth. So it's really good to start developing that awareness, even of the fact that you are stressed, because sometimes we just have to plow ahead without letting ourselves actually kind of recognize and take the time that we need to balance that. I'd just add to what you both said already, just maybe two more points. One would be to really focus on writing skills. This is going to be a huge asset no matter where you go or what you do. The ability to convey your ideas in a clear and compelling way to multiple audiences. It's crucial, not only in an academic track, but also when it comes to presenting yourself professionally, like what Dean Kew is saying in his opening remarks. You want to be able to explain how your profile and your interests and expertise, meets the needs of these different organizations or can help solve different problems. And you'll really want proficiency in many different types of writing and presentation skills. Some people want the details, they want a lengthy discussion with a lot of justification and citations. Other readers will barely have time to skim the first page. So overall, these strong writing skills are an asset. I would say as advice, use your assignments to really try to practice clear writing and communication, and ask for feedback. Like, ask your professors to give you feedback on your writing. And the second there would be, perhaps I'm a bit biased because I'm a research nerd, but develop, at least a basic level of comfort with research methods and research literacy, perhaps including qualitative and quantitative methods, as well as kind of principles of research design, because these are, they are concrete skills that are marketable. As Ernest was saying, you have this skill set that is really transferable, and it helps you ask big questions about the world, as well as to be a kind of discerning consumer of research, because we'll all also encounter, maybe it's other research that you'll hear your colleagues citing when they're trying to develop an evidence-based humanitarian intervention. It can be something like that. It's good for you to have that basic literacy in research to know whether it's sound or not, or even for your own consumption with splashy headlines, saying, I don't know, studies show that bubblegum is good for sleep or something like that. So just really kind of having a working familiarity. You don't have to be an expert in all of these methods, but just develop some comfort and familiarity with research design and a few different methods if you can. Those would be my 2 bits of advice.
That's great. Zoe, I see you raised your hand if you want to ask your question.
Hi. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to do these presentations. It is very interesting and very inspiring. So I guess my question is for all of you guys. I'm at the point where I'm very interested in many very different things, and I still don't really know what kind of work I would like to be doing after my master's. So my question is, how were you guys able to narrow down your interest in the field of peace and justice?
Okay, let me go first. But first, Zoe, just to let you know, for me, okay, first, maybe I'll ask you, what interests you? What do you like doing? Because my professor did ask me, what keeps you awake at night? Yeah. So first you have to understand, your interests, just the type of thing you like to do, or the type of work you like to do. That could also help you to navigate. But for me, well, I used to say that I'm not, maybe I'm a professor by mistake, Of course, I'm an aid worker. And again, my career, my education, okay, I have 5 degrees in different fields. So which means that, and most traditional professors just focus, on history, But unlike me, 5 degrees, different fields. It is an advantage, it's a disadvantage. Because it's an advantage in the sense that I can easily latch into different things, which is good. Yeah, so which makes me marketable in the job market. Because some of us that study international development, my professor did tell me, because even then, the question we have then was that, because in international development, it's a very diverse field. The question we have then is that, how do we specialize? But I can remember what my professor said. He said that we are not training you to specialize, but we are training you to be a manager. And as a manager, you have to know little of everything. You have to know gender, you have to know health, you have to, you know different fields, and that enables you to contribute. And when you are managing people, that also helps you so that whichever angle they are coming in, you can contribute. So that is international development. It's a diverse field. But at the same time, again, you should have an interest within that field. Are you interested in health? Are you interested in education? Are you interested in gender? Are you interested in peace and conflict? So for me, I studied international development, but I was interested in conflict, peace and conflict, because that is an area which I want to focus on. Yeah, so studying different fields is good, but also have a particular one which you can still latch on. But know when to change your cap, because if it's environment, maybe you can now wear environmental cap, If it's a gender, that also help you in the market to know. And that's why you tailor your CV based on the job you're applying, And that also help them to invite you for interview. Yeah, so it's good to know little of everything. But at the same time, it's also good to specialize. Maybe if you want to be a professor like me, you can now want to specialize. But if you want to remain in the job market, I would advise you, to still keep all those different areas, because you don't know which one is going to be marketable tomorrow. So that's my advice.
Thank you so much.
That was great, Ernest. And apologies to interject, because I think that Jenny and Hayley might have good responses too, but we are at time for this session. And we have a short.
We will have each of our panelist members introduce themselves, and then talk about your work, and then we'll go into questions and answers. So I hope our three enrolled students right now have some really great questions for these recent alumni. So I guess we'll go alphabetical, Sarah. So then you go first.
The whole thing, whole remarks, sure thing.
Yes.
Hello everyone. Sarah Finmore, MAPJ 2023. I don't want to step on Rachel's toes too much, so I feel like you can just fill in whatever I miss. But yeah, so I am actually, it's funny, I had never heard the term Beltway Bandit before when in describing government contractors, but that's actually how I got my foot in the door at the State Department. I guess I'll just kind of run through, I'll start from the top and then get more into the nitty-gritty of the actual work. So in terms of how I started my career, I am from Arizona originally and majored in global studies from the University of Arizona. And then I went home, had no idea what I was going to do. I found an unpaid internship that I thought was going to be in California. It was in DC, working on rainforest protection and indigenous rights advocacy. And I say that because a few months after arriving, I serendipitously fell into a position with a government contractor working on drug trafficking and money laundering investigations, which was really intense. And so I could give you my whole life story, or we can just have a coffee virtual chat later. But what I will say is, having that job, I started getting really interested in drug-related conflicts. They're a really instrument tool of understanding global trends, global conflicts. So I kind of just became like, how can I figure out how drugs work and move? And so that took me to Chile because I wanted to get more research experience about drug trafficking in the Southern Cone. I spent time in Peru doing disaster recovery work. And then I came back and wanted to understand the demand side. So I worked for a overdose prevention nonprofit. And so all of these different spheres of the kind of drug conflict spectrum got kind of overwhelming a little bit, especially after working in overdose prevention. And so I took a step back and went to Kroc to be like, how am I going to approach these issues in a way that makes sense for me? And so, going through Kroc, there's one thing I want to say is just with the power of networking, it's what led me in there, but I'll get to that when we have time or after we have time. But so within the State Department is humongous. I'm going to put in the organizational chart into the chat, and you will see that there are so many different bureaus and teams, and there's also it's broken down into civil service, people who are working in DC, and then there's foreign service officers who work in embassies and abroad, and there are all sorts of different work streams through there. And I can send more links. Feel free to ask questions after about follow-up information, but within my job in that whole sphere of that chart, I am in the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement. Do not consider myself a police officer. I haven't really been interested in that in the past, but what I really liked about it and what brought me in is there is a team on drug demand reduction, which is part of the Office of Global Programs and Policy. So within my office, there's folk who work on like policy and negotiations with like in United Nations, partner governments about better ways to approach drug issue globally and in practice, because then the State Department also provides foreign assistance funding in a different level as USAID, there's differences there, but that's where I'm at. I'm on the programming side of how are we supporting partner governments to increase the science behind like youth prevention of drug use or treatment and recovery. So typical day is I do a lot of communications in terms of in between offices, in between post, or but with when I say post, I mean that's embassies in other countries. A lot of it, biggest thing I've been working on, it's funny trying to summarize it all in just a short period of time, but I will just say that a lot of the skills I learned at Kroc in terms of navigating such a big organization and then outside of the organization with bilateral relationships with countries, multilateral with international organizations. It takes a lot of strategic analysis and how you represent yourself, recognizing that you're representing the US government at the same time. It can be kind of tricky. And yes, I did want to say just one thing following Dean Kew's point about doing unpaid labor. I was very spicy about this when I was at Kroc because I'm like, it's still my labor. And during, I joined one of these sessions before, and when I brought up that question, whoever was on it was like, oh yeah, actually I could use some unpaid labor, and didn't really answer the question. So I'll just say that unpaid labor can really work in your favor. That's how I got here. It was like 6 degrees of separation of just helping different people, and it ended up connecting me here. So that's me in a nutshell. I hope I didn't go over time, but I'm here for questions after.
Thank you, Sarah. And I like the nutshell reference. I mean, I can still find your video. Robert, we'll go to you in the visitor center at the Capitol.
Well, hello there. My name is Robert McDonald. I'm from the National Democratic Institute of International Affairs. I'm currently a program associate on the Democratic Governance team, working on legislative strengthening and doing some work on anti-corruption. As Hillary said, I'm currently in the Capitol building. It's one of the perks of NDI is that you get invited to a lot of events. I spent the last 2 days with Busola Tech and the Organization of American States on a conference bringing parliamentarians, bringing industry leaders to Washington, D.C. to discuss AI in Parliament, which has been exhausting, but yet a lot of fun. I was happy to step out and chat with you all, but I'll give you a little about myself. So before I actually went to the Kroc School, I actually worked in the United States House of Representatives for 2 years as a district representative. I did not work in the Capitol building. This is actually my first time here, so I've been nerding out about that. I actually got that position through an unpaid internship with Congresswoman Julie Brownlee's office. It was one of those ones I only showed up 1 day a week because I could only have time on Fridays. And I excelled at my position, and they offered me a position right when my internship ended. It was actually even before I finished my bachelor's degree that they gave me the job because of the work that I did. And through working in Congress, you know, I was working in the institution with the January 6th insurrection. I became very motivated to learn about resurgent nationalism, began to really want to learn about that type of ideology and how it grows. And I actually decided to go to the Kroc School, which I focused a lot of my research on those types of issues, resurgent nationalism, ethnic strife, in particular in democratic states and former democratic states, which put me in a very strong position to work in the field that I'm in. I am at the National Democratic Institute. And while I was at Kroc, I actually got connected with a colleague of mine on the Southern and East Africa team. She's a senior program manager. She is much higher ranking than me right now, Christina Murphy. We chatted for about a year while I was still in my master's program. And when I graduated, talking to her and talking to somebody else who lived in DC, I had realized that the best position for me was to actually move to DC, actually without a position. So I basically packed up from San Diego, left the DC, moved into a spot, networked every single day while I was in DC, and networked myself into what is called a TPA position, a temporary project assistant. You know, I should know these titles. And when I was doing that, I did that for about 5 months, and it's a 6-month temporary position. It's paid. I made $19 an hour, which sucked because I used to be a full-time paid staffer. But I got to work on some incredible issues. Like on my program itself, I was working on Sudan, I was working on Malawi, I was working on Zambia. I did a lot of conflict resolution on Sudan. We helped put programs together with internally displaced populations, refugees, getting them together to coalesce around this group called Takatum, which is the Civilian Democratic Organizations. It's an incredible program I got to work on even as an intern. And because I was more advanced, having a master's degree and having this background, I was given a lot more responsibility. And as a TPA, you actually have an inside track into getting full-time positions here at NDI. And you're able to apply like 2 weeks early to these roles. So I was able to apply to the Democratic Governance team and got hired into this role. So I'm trying to keep this as short as I can. It's been a crazy last 11 months. And since I've joined the Democratic Governance team, I've had the opportunity to go to North Macedonia and Skopje, which we brought in, I think it was 16 participants from 8 different countries, from Moldova, Kyrgyzstan, Kosovo, the United States, Germany, the Czech Republic, Albania, North Macedonia, of course. We brought all their research together, and we did a facilitated dialogue that I got to help run, plan the logistics, bringing all these individuals there. By the way, I'm still technically entry level, being able to do all these responsibilities, and had amazing facilitated discussion with them. And then about a month and a half ago, which honestly feels like 6 years ago because I had to move, I was in Bogota, Colombia, working with the Afro-Colombian Commission, NDI, and the Democratic Governance team, specifically the House Democracy Partnership, which I work on. We do a lot of overseas programming. And we brought, I can't say their names because we do have Captain House rules and we do publish some of the statements, but we don't identify who they are, so I can't say their names. That we brought in 1 former member of Congress and 2 former staffers and 1 current staffer in the United States House of Representatives, working with the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, to meet with the Afro-Colombian Commission to help them establish basically a similar type of program to the Congressional Black Caucus, and having them meet the needs of the Afro-Colombian population, which has a lot of similar issues as the African-American population here. Phenomenal facilitated dialogue. I got to learn a ton, especially from our local Columbia team. But in planning those programs, like we're doing logistics, we're planning flights, we're going through budgeting. We work a lot with USAID, now the National Endowment for Democracy. We were considered one of the CEPS partners, which is the Consortium for Election and Political Participation, which is with us. I think the dean had mentioned IRI, IFES, ABA, ROLI. We all specialize in democratic governance and helping other countries with their democratic institutions. We are not beholden to U.S. foreign policy. It's if the U.S. government's doing something, say, I mean, for instance, we actually have programming in Yemen. We had staffers in Sana'a until they were recently detained by the Houthis, but we still do have programming in areas of the United States that doesn't function, such as the Houthi-controlled zone. We have programming in the West Bank and Gaza. We have programming in Lebanon. We have programming basically anywhere where you actually see civil society and political leaders being willing to have democratic reform, women empowerment, bringing minorities in there. That's where NDI works, and that's the kind of stuff I get to work on. My day-to-day does not sound as cool as what I did. Like there's some days which is like incredibly boring, which, you know, I'll be working from home, I'll play some video games for a little bit, might read. But overall, the work that we do here is incredible. We do have a great effect, and it's actually a lot of fun to do. And you get to travel, which is a huge perk.
Thank you, Robert. And then on to Rachel.
Oh, hi, sorry. There's like there was another call ringing. I'm like, stop. Okay. Hi, I'm Rachel. For those of you who knew me in Kroc School, I did change my name. So I was Rachel Mactow. Now I'm Rachel Navas, got married this year. But thank you. But I am a passport specialist at the Department of State. Like Sarah said, department is so big. I'm in the Bureau of Consular Affairs. And I've been here for 3 years now. So I got my Bachelor of Arts in International Relations and Communications. And after I graduated, I was like, I don't know, what I want to do. I joined the Peace Corps. I was a water, sanitation, hygiene, education volunteer in Panama. And I didn't get to finish out because of COVID. So when I came back, I was like, I'm just going to apply for jobs. I'm going to apply for grad school. Luckily with Peace Corps, we got non-competitive eligibility. So when we applied for any federal jobs, we didn't really have to compete with people who didn't have any Peace Corps experience kind of thing, or that kind of government background. But so I got a job offer in May of 2020 and I accepted it, but I also got into grad school. So I was like, I'm going to accept grad school too. So I went to Kroc School. And it wasn't until after my first year of Kroc that I actually got to start this job. So it just, the security clearance like process is so long that it was like, whoa, good thing I did go to grad school, you know? And yeah, so again, been here 3 years. I mean, it is pretty straightforward. Like, yeah, we're approving and denying passport applications. But there are different, aspects of it. Like, we have customer service, we have a fraud department, we have a public counter here. So my office is in downtown San Diego. We have a public counter for people who have urgent travel, but otherwise, we're processing the applications that come in through the mail. And I guess, yeah, I'll wait to move on to the other questions, but that is, yeah, pretty much the quick and dirty.
Thank you. And Rachel, you were president of the Student Association, right? Yes.
I was when it was PJSA. Yes.
Formerly known as.
Yes.
Well, I have a list of questions for our three panelists. This is for our attendees. So if you have questions, unmute yourself, write in the chat, whatever you want to do. You don't have to turn your camera on if you're not comfortable. But yeah, this is your time to pick the brains of these awesome alumni.
Yeah, for sure. I can go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Haner Abdon. My pronouns are he, him, his. And a question I have for all three of you is, what is or was one of the favorite projects that you are working or have worked on? And what reflections came out of those projects?
I can go first, if that's all right. I don't see you guys unmuting. So I actually came onto state because the Secretary of State launched the Global Coalition to address synthetic drug threats. They started through a virtual ministerial, which is basically like a Zoom call with 80 different foreign minister leaders, kind of at a high level, where they also are committing to the issue of synthetic drugs, and they wrote a declaration. And since then, for the past year, I've been the lead program officer on coordinating the monthly coalition meetings. They're like 14 hours a month because we had 7 in the East Hemisphere, or for the East time zone. So I was up from like 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. running these calls because, and this is why it was so meaningful to me, is because the coalition is split between 3 different threads of supply reduction, which is kind of your typical law enforcement, data interventions, and then drug demand reduction programming. And through this entire year that's been incredibly intensive, I see a lot how our conflict analysis, resolution, facilitation, and dialogue skills directly connect with diplomacy. And yes, that has been extremely meaningful in helping me to conceptualize how, as a change maker, how, like, I remember, I forget what class it was, but there was a slide that was like, when you're going into any type of conflict, whether it be interpersonal, intrapersonal, social, cultural, having to reflect of who am I in this situation. When I go onto a Zoom call and I'm representing something much bigger than myself, how do I need to keep myself in check? So that was really significant. I don't know if that answered both parts of your question, but I needed to pop off right from the start.
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Oh, I could go. I mean, that's a tough one to do. I think I probably have 2 kind of answers because of the role that we do. But my top one is going to Colombia and having to work on that program and getting to meet with and learn about the differences, say, in the Colombian Constitution, which has basically been adapted to help conflict survivors, but also how that constitutional amendments, how they created that, has actually disenfranchised minority groups and indigenous groups, and that when they actually tried to fix it for the indigenous groups, it actually did more damage to the Afro-Colombian population. So you're learning about all of these different issues and having to get that lived experience from the actual individuals who live there, which is amazing because you're in DC, you can't really write policy on people you don't know. We work with in-country staff, so I was able just to basically be quiet and listen. But when it comes to, say, project reports and things that we've done that was the most applicable to Kroc School is we were writing a proposal on Sudan. It was a Paris proposal, and I got to write the gender analysis on what has basically been the condition of women since the conflict started, women, people with disabilities. I got to do extensive research going into humanitarian sources, UN sources, also learning from our in-country team, well, formerly in-country team. Khartoum has been evacuated, so like they're in different countries and more Port Sudan. Being able to learn from them the actual sources of the conflict, because when you hear about Sudan, say in the States, I would say most things I've heard are 100% incorrect, especially if you go into groups here that kind of talk about it. They don't have a clue about it. That because when you actually talk to the Sudanese, when you talk to the individuals there, you learn so much of the fact of what's happened to the population. And that we got to create a proposal, and although it's small, and the programs that we do, they don't have massive systemic effect. You are providing assistance, you're getting that kind of gendered source, learning what people who are not normally discussed in conflict circles, what their actual condition is, and learning actually how you write programming to help those people and put a spotlight with them and actually get them more involved, say in the peace process, or in the former, in the Sudan case, how do we get them into a position where they can actually have an effect on reconstruction? It was a great project to do. I mean, I was an intern doing it. I think the program was approved before I had left. But yeah, no, it's an incredible program. And I got to use so many of the skills of program design, mediation, and actual aspects of negotiation in that one paper that I got to write. It was incredible to do. It was fun and depressing.
For sure. Thank you.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it's like not anything that Robert or Sarah were doing, which just sounds so amazing. But I'm working on a project right now that is very dear to my heart. It's mostly just for passport staff, but it's a working group that we're doing for empowering introverts. And it's just really interesting to me because I'm an introvert. And so we're trying to like compile resources that would be helpful for people that might consider themselves to be introverts as well. And then hopefully doing some kind of like panel where we get to hear about, experiences in the workplace of, being an introvert and how that is affecting our roles. And so, yeah, we're still like in the planning process of it, but like I think once we finish it, that's when I'm gonna get like the bigger takeaways from it.
You
Sure,
should
thank you.
share that with us when it comes, if it's public, if it's public. And Rachel, you're in San Diego, right? In the San Diego area?
Yes, I'm in San
Yeah.
Diego. Mhm.
I thought. Okay, any other questions? Polly, Shannon, Alejandro?
I have a question. I'm just wondering, during your time at Kroc, it's kind of a weird question. Let's see. Is there anything you wish you had taken advantage of that you didn't? Or what was the most helpful thing you did while here that helped perpetuate the jobs or the places you're in? I mean, we heard your journey, but are there things that we can do here that will make a difference too? I don't know. If that makes sense.
I mean, I could go a little bit into that. First of all, that is not a weird question. That is an absolutely fantastic question to ask. And also, weird questions are the most fun. So if you have a weird question, ask them. I think if I could go back and things I would do that were different is when I was over the summer, I would have interned in DC. I interned with the city of San Diego. I interned with the International Rescue Committee. And all of those were valuable experiences. I would say I should have 100% come out here for the summer and just intern out here, got that experience together, which would have put me a step ahead from where I was. So when I did graduate, I probably would have had an opportunity to stay with NDI, IFAS, or other institutions out here. If there was things I would have taken advantage of more, probably would have focused more on outside sources of research, having more conversations with the intelligence that we have in-house, speaking more to our professors about their lived experience, their backgrounds, their knowledge, also talking to professors outside the Kroc Institute. I think that was something I did not take enough advantage of while I was there. And I think asking questions of people that, if you may sound weird, you want to ask, say, Dr. Sharp, you want to say, ask Phil the question, just walk in there and ask him. I think, Phil was here for the practicum, and the conversation that we had about his work was unbelievable. And I wish I would taken advantage of that when I was in the Kroc Institute.
That's really helpful.
And Rachel, feel free to cut me off, but I think my answer is kind of two parts. And this sounds kind of funny as well, is the biggest regret I have is, I don't know if you guys still have to do this and how your final portfolios are, but there's for us, there was like a long research paper requirement. And so I did mine, and I don't know if Austin or Professor, if Austin still does this class, but the social movements class, and I chose a topic that was really distant from me. I wrote about like a Bolivian indigenous rights movement from like 20 years ago, because I was a little too nervous to actually apply the class to something that was really personal to me, which was harm reduction and overdose prevention. And I really regret that, because the amount of like substantive knowledge that I gained about this one specific thing, I wish I had spent all that time focusing on something that like impacted me now, but I was just too scared. So I think my advice would be like, don't overstress what you want to write about, but I'd just think about what personally matters to you right now, of where you want to spend all of that intellectual energy to unpack. And I don't know, that's my example of like, I wish I'd done something that was more relevant to me in this moment. And then the other thing I'd highly recommend, and I feel like it must get annoying. It kind of did for me, of hearing the importance of networking. The way I found this job is I came to the Kroc School for a specific professor who ended up not being there. She had research that I looked up, and I was like, I got to study under her, but then she wasn't there. But after having a coffee with her, I was able to like do some of that unpaid research stuff for her, almost like a homework assignment. But then she introduced me to Dana, who was in the government sphere. Dana introduced me to Brenda, who introduced me to Gina, and Gina introduced me to Brian, who is now my boss. So there's gonna be a lot of awkward networking things that are like, I don't know where I'm going with this, but being a grad student is like the ultimate door opener to get people to talk to you, because you're not coming with an agenda, and it's kind of implicit of like, you're trying to figure out a job, but it's not like aggressive, So those would be my 2 points.
And mine, oh, sorry, Holly.
Oh, I was saying that these are all really good. I'm glad I asked. Keep going.
Yeah, I thought this was a great question, because as I was talking earlier, I was like, oh, there's these things that I wish I had done in Kroc. And it was mostly that I wish I had taken like these, like, I had to look them up, because I was like, I forget what they're called, these skills and methods classes that I was like, these would be very useful in my job. Program design, monitoring, and evaluation. I didn't take that. I wish I did. Impact evaluation, I wish I took that too. So I think those kinds of like more like, I don't know, hard skills classes, I wish I had taken more of those.
Thank you so much. That's great.
Robert and Sarah, I'm curious, I lived and worked in DC for the government for a long time back in the Obama administration, and very much like a West Coast girl, West Coast education. And I remember a lot of my colleagues went to DC area schools, or at least East Coast schools, and I was the weird West Coast person. So how was your like very West Coast education? Both of your undergrads and grads, but specifically with Kroc being, in San Diego, the southern part of California. How has that helped you or hurt you, maybe even, if we're going to be transparent here, in your career in DC with working in those circles?
Miss Sarah, do you mind if I go? I mean, so being from the West Coast, it turns into a joke. So I mean, I was born in the Los Angeles area in Ventura County. I've lived on the West Coast my whole life. I had never seen snow fall until this last December in DC. And I think, sorry, my coworkers is making fun of me for how loud I am. I think one of the things is like you could turn it into advantage. Like I turn it into a joke all the time about public transportation, have fun with it. It can be a little different. Like the culture is actually different. I would say I actually don't miss San Diego at all. I've absolutely fallen in love with DC. It is, I think, the best city I've ever lived in. The public transportation is great. I very much have enjoyed the culture, the community that's here. I'm at events all the time, you can tell. And I would say having that kind of difference has, I think, been a strength in that we can kind of turn it into a joke. We make fun of LA, we make fun of Philly, we kind of all make fun of the different areas that we're all from because DC is such a transient city. And say when the weather got really bad, we played a game at work as how miserable is Robert going to be by the end of summer? And luckily I was not. But yeah, it's one of these things you can have fun with it, make that difference into a strength. And I would say DC overall is a very culturally welcoming city. Like I live in Silver Spring now, but I used to live by Columbia Heights. You have so much cultural diversity, language diversity, cuisine diversity. Mexican food is terrible, but everything else is fantastic. Like I was over at an Asian, they had an Asian cultural festival where I got to talk to people to basically this whole group was born in China, and they basically explained their past and their history, and it was just such a beautiful experience. So no, it's been one of the easiest adjustments I've had. I would say the adjustment was easier going from San Diego to DC than it was LA to DC. I mean, LA to San Diego.
Cool. I love that it's like rocking your world. I'm excited to have a kind of a very different perspective because while I love DC, I lived here in my early 20s, and now coming back with I actually got married 2 weeks before graduating back in San Diego. It was a wild time. But my husband had never lived in DC before nor visited. And he is he's a hippie. I consider myself a hippie, in terms of being kind of like relaxed and wanting to, I don't know, be more informal sometimes. And I feel like, especially working with the State Department where protocol and like just very being officialness, and then also working within the DC government, and that it's very career oriented. There's a lot to reconcile there of like, who am I in this space? Like even here's an example I was talking about with my husband last night of even in terms of like the clothes you wear. Like I like wearing a lot of color and headbands and whatnot. But then I kind of have my my government worker uniform with like flats and whatever not. But my husband said, or I forget who said it first, but it's like Superman doesn't wear his cape all the time. You dress for the place that you're used to. But right now we're actually in the process of really kind of trying to find our people because it's such a transient place. There's people from so many different walks of life and so many different people looking for different things. So it definitely can be an adjustment. I know it's been a big adjustment for my husband, but finding the right place to live in actually is really important. We moved kind of blind because we just had to like go, and we moved to this area that was really new buildings and there wasn't a lot of greenery. And then we moved to this new neighborhood, Logan Circle, a couple months ago, and we're so much happier. So you figure it out over time.
Thank you, guys. Any more questions from our students? We still have 10, 15 minutes, really. There's one of our DC practicum students on here. Learned a lot about US government. Okay, I have a question. Finding jobs. Can you all talk about your specific organization right now? I mean, besides usajobs.gov, but how you can best navigate those systems. Maybe let Robert go first since he doesn't work at a .gov job search, about finding openings and applying. I think that'd be helpful.
So happy to do it. Yes, we are a non-governmental organization, so it does not go to the US Gov. I just put the Institute's website on the chat. So, I mean, NDI, it's a little different because we are a union organization. I mean, interns themselves aren't part of the union, but the TPAs were created under the collective bargaining agreement. So every union position is paid. I mean, every position under DI is paid. If you have a bachelor's degree, it's $18 an hour. If you have a master's degree, it's $19 an hour. Those are all sad, but it's better than zero. But getting a job in DI is, for one, I kind of explain the organizations real quick. So we have what's called regional team and functional teams. I am part of a functional team, which is democratic governance. We also have political parties, elections, peace, conflicts, and climate. I had a meeting with them yesterday. I should remember this. We also have gender. We also have a gender team as well. And those are all functional teams. They work across all the regions. That's why I have such a diverse portfolio in different states. And then we have regional teams. And my first job was as a TPA, was on the Southern East Africa team, which is the old predominantly English-speaking states of Africa. We have Central and West Africa, which is predominantly French-speaking states. And then you have the Middle East and North Africa, which is North Africa and Middle East. You have Eurasia, which is the Caucasus, Turkey, Russia, Central Asia. Then you have Eastern Europe and Latin America and the Caribbean. And each one of those, each one of those regions, of course, they have a preference for a language requirement. So if you're saying applying to Central West Africa, they're going to love if you speak French. It's not a requirement. They're just going to love it. Middle East and North Africa, Arabic, French as well. Latin America, you have to speak Spanish to get a position there. With Eurasia, if you speak any sort of Russian or Central Asian language, you're great. With our Asia team, any sort of Asian language will get you a position potentially. And to get a position there, you basically go on NDI's website. They'll have what's called, basically they'll have just a list up there. It'll say temporary program project assistant, and it'll have the region, the team that you're going to be on, go through the application process. It's annoying. It's a very annoying, very, very annoying process. But through that process itself, once you complete that, say if you were to, I would just say if you do find a position, honestly, email me, email anybody else who works at NDI. Christina Murphy, Nana Cohen, she just got hired there. Email any of us, and you could send us a resume. You could have a chat with us. I would love to get to know you or kind of what you were doing. And then one of these that we can do is we can always email the director of that team to let them know you applied. Which doesn't guarantee you an interview, but it just guarantees that you might get your resume through our very annoying HR. But it's a very simple process. You just have to go through the application process itself, and each team does hire differently. It can take some time, but say if you see a position with DimGov, you just email me. I would be able to talk to one of my colleagues there. I, of course, would have a conversation first, and everybody else in the other team. That's the kind of process it is. But I highly recommend you see something on the website, reach out to somebody you know there. If that makes sense.
Thank you, Robert. Rachel, do you want to share? Holly, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry. Well, it's kind of has to do with this a little bit. Oops, sorry. My dog's jumping all over here. Okay, so I'm older and I'm tied, I have family in Utah, and that's where most of my kids are and everything. And so I'm not wanting to move to DC. I actually have a son working in DC for the government in public policy. He graduated in public policy, but he's with the Federal Reserve Board. So, but in some of the job opportunities that came through just with the emails here, I saw that there are opportunities to work for the state or to work for, government, like in Utah, and there was a full-time position in mediation or something. And I was like, oh, there are opportunities hopefully down the road in Utah, because I am interested in that kind of work. But I don't know what I'm interested in. I'm still figuring it out, but that's one of the possibilities. And so I'm wondering if how do you get that? How do you get this on your radar, or know what's available in a community or area you want to live? And also, do you happen to know if there's anything that has to do with peace building within religion and interfaith work or spaces in the government? Is anybody looking at that? So that's kind of a strange question, but just wondering. There you go.
Do you mind if I ask a follow? Are you looking for specifically in government, or are you looking for intergovernment, multilateral, non-governmental?
I am anything. NGOs, in government, but you guys are all, well, most of you work within government systems and stuff, but Yeah, no, I'm open to anything. So I'm just curious how you even explore, especially when you're being more specific about where you want to be in an area or stay. So just
I mean,
curious.
I can answer some of that just because I mean, I still apply for positions every once in a while because I want to make more money. But I would say the resource I have found best for the NGO world, and I think there's a lot of institutes that do interreligious peace building. There are actually tons of institutes that focus on religious aspects as well. I just don't know off the top of my head. I would say UN Jobs is one of the best resources for those type of in non-governmental organizations, especially that work internationally. NDI posts there, IRI posts there, I think Comonix, FH360 posts there, SIPE. I'm doing a lot of acronyms, but like most of those large NGOs that do significant peace building, even just away from the United Nations, they all get mostly posted on UN Jobs. I would also say the website the Dean put up, which I can't remember, probably is a great resource. I would also, I don't think our peace conflict does it as well, but also reach out to people in institutes that you think might have that type of peripheral work and ask them that question. They might have resources that even I don't know or a director level doesn't know. Most people, when they get an email like that, as long as they have time, could point you in the direction or set you up with conversations with someone on that.
And then usajobs.gov, you can filter by remote jobs too. And there's a lot. I mean, Rachel was like the first person I heard of back pandemic times to get this really cool job, not in DC. But that's like, I think passport offices also, there's passport has a different categories, and I'm sure Sarah and Rachel can talk more in depth about that. But we only have 5 minutes. I want to make Shannon hasn't asked a question yet, and I see Shannon's hand up. Shannon, do you have a question?
Oh yeah, I have a quick question. So all these jobs sound super intriguing, but as a Canadian, I'm wondering if any of these will be open to non-US citizens because I'm looking at the department chart, but I'm not sure if like it's only available for US citizens. How would it work if you're Canadian or an international student who's interested in government and policy work?
That's a great question. And it's something that I meant to get an answer for before I got here, because it was a question that came up during the DC practicum too. I'm not as familiar with it, but I know that there are locally employed staff at embassies. I don't know how it works because I don't know how it works exactly, but I could probably find, I've just found this website here. And if it's something that interests you, email me or Rachel, and I bet we could find someone who would have more information. But I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I know that I work personally a lot with locally employed staff at different embassies for the coalition. And they're super helpful. So that's one element there, but maybe Robert being from kind of the non-government space might be helpful too.
And also contract positions. I remember when I worked at the library, contractors that are hired as like third party positions could be any nationality.
Perfect. Thank you.
I would say the NGOs, we don't have citizen requirements. If you are from another country, we have a country office in, you probably have an advantage over anybody who's an American citizen. Say if you're, so like, I actually would say, I know I was just in a conference with this one woman, Alicia. She is the president of Americares. She is a Canadian citizen. She ran a massive Miami-based. We did a program in Miami on AI in the Caribbean that she ran. But yeah, she is a Canadian citizen. I think she is the president of the organization. So there's in the NGO world, there's tons of opportunities for that type of cross-sectional work that works with governments and NGOs as well.
Perfect.
And in some cases, is an advantage to not be an American citizen.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, I know these 3 alumni, and I know their emails are always open to Kroc students. So please, I see you've all put your emails in the chat. If you miss it and you need to follow up with one of these amazing panelists, please email me. I'm happy to connect you. But I can't say it enough. Like, take Robert up on his offer to have a chat if you see a job. Same with Sarah and Rachel. If you see something in their realm, in the State Department, even, they may not know someone, but they'll be like, okay, here's how you navigate this. Just knowing somebody in these circles really, really helps you get a position, as I think you all can attest to that. So I'm supposed to give everybody a 4-minute break right now. I'm getting yelled at in the chat. So please take your 4-minute break, and then at 1:25, we'll come back to the main room for the second breakout session. But Sarah, Rachel, Robert, always so good to see you all. I hope you have enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And Rachel, we're going to survive this heat wave in DC. This is just, I mean, San Diego. This is so terrible. Oh, it's so hot. It's like 72 degrees.
I told Sarah I'm heading to DC next week, so I'm getting out of here.
Yeah, 72 degrees.
Bye, y'all. Have a good one.
Yay, thank you
Bye,
all.
y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Welcome, everyone. I am your moderator for the session. We'll give folks a few minutes to jump in. I think people were doing bio breaks, snack breaks, all that kind of good stuff. So we'll give a few more moments and then we'll get started. Thank you to our panelists for being here. Hope everyone's enjoying the expo so far. I think we'll go ahead and get started just to be on time. Just a heads up for folks in the room, we are recording this, so if you feel more comfortable being off camera, just want to give you a warning there. But we're going to go ahead and jump in. I'll give a super brief intro to our panelists because they're going to really dive into that themselves. But we have Angel Ibarra here with the Episcopal Community Services, Darlene Nionzima, sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, and I don't actually see Darlene in here yet, so she's probably on her way. And Misael Guzman or Morales, thank you for being here as well from the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. And we will keep an eye out for Darlene when she gets in. I know I saw her on the call. But I'm going to give each of our panelists about 5-7 minutes to kind of go through their career journey so far. And then we'll have some time for question and answers at the end. So we'll go ahead and start with Angel. And for those in the call, if you have questions as we're going through, feel free to write them in the chat. And at the end, we'll kind of open up for discussion. So without further ado, we'll start with Angel. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you, Daria. My name is Angel Ibarra, and I am the Associate Director of Strategic Partnerships and Government Affairs with Episcopal Community Services. We are a nonprofit based here in San Diego. But before I go into some of the work that Episcopal Community Services does, I believe we are going to start with just a little bit about my career path. My undergraduate degree was actually in politics. And then right after my undergraduate degree, I went into education. I went to St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia for my master's in education and was a teacher in Philadelphia for about 4 years. Well, a teacher and an administrator. But during my time as an educator, I got to see some of the challenges that our community was facing, the challenges that the students were coming into the classroom with. And that really propelled me to want to do a little bit more in the community because as a teacher, you were just kind of getting all the stuff that people were coming with, but there wasn't a way to really engage with parents or provide some of the community resources. And that's what kind of propelled me to want to pursue my master's at the Kroc School. So I moved to California in 2017 and started Kroc then. I was always passionate about politics, passionate about education, and really passionate about, how education can really step in and break that cycle of poverty. And so that's kind of what drew me to education in the first place. And while I was at the Kroc School, I knew I wanted to get involved with some local community organizations that were really addressing some of the pressing issues of the community that we have here in San Diego. And so I actually started working at Mission San Luis Rey, which is a church up in Oceanside, running their outreach programs. And so we had our programs focused mainly on food insecurity and housing and utility insecurity. And so we ran a food pantry and also did rent and utility assistance programs. And so, you know, looking at those issues that are so prevalent in our San Diego community gave me a really good understanding of what is needed to really make a change, make an impact in that space. One of those things that I saw that was really helpful is building strong partnerships. No one organization can do all the work. You really do need to develop partnerships, and we're really lucky here in San Diego that we have such great community partners, and it just seems like everyone is ready to step in and help however they can. And so that actually was what propelled me to change careers. Well, not change careers, but change my position. And I started working with Episcopal Community Services. And I started as the community engagement manager. So starting to build some of those really strong partnerships with other people, other folks in the community who are doing some of the similar work that we were doing. And that also kind of led me to go back to my roots in politics, which is through the advocacy work that we do. So now part of my role is to work with our nonprofit partners. Part of my role is also to work with our government officials as a liaison between ECS and our programs and some of the policymakers in the local area. And then also with our faith-based partners. That was actually one of the things that really drew me to USD's program to begin with. And then I know I might be a little long-winded, but we go into our what our organization does, correct, Daria? Or is that a different question?
No, you can share a little bit of that now. Yeah, you have time.
Okay, perfect. And so at ECS, Episcopal Community Services, our mission is to break barriers and transform communities through our tradition of action and faith in God. And so ECS serves the community through several key programs that focus on creating lasting change in the lives of individuals and families. Some of the major areas of work that we're involved in is early childhood education. And we do this through our Head Start program. So if you're not familiar with Head Start provides high quality early childhood education to low-income families that really lays the foundation for future academic and personal success. So right now we serve about 1,400 children and families through our Head Start program throughout the South Bay. So we have 17 early childhood education centers from National City all the way down to San Ysidro. Most of our programs staff are bilingual in that program. So really addressing the needs for that the Hispanic community. And through that, I also get to use some of my education background advocating for programs like Head Start on a wider level. Some of the other programs that we have are homeless and housing stability. So we have transitional housing facilities called safe havens. And these programs offer more than just a place to stay. They provide comprehensive services, including mental health support, substance abuse treatment, and life skills training, which helps individuals transition to stable and independent living. This is one of the programs where, you know, as everyone in San Diego knows, homelessness is such a huge issue, but we're working with individuals who are chronically homeless and who also have a diagnosed mental health challenge. So to really get them to the place where they can get to live independently, giving them the resources and wraparound services that they need to stabilize their lives before they can go into independent living. We also offer a variety of behavioral health services. So our mental health and substance use disorder treatment programs really emphasize that trauma-informed care. So we have a program called Para las Familias, which is behavioral health counseling for children and families in the South Bay. That program is based in San Ysidro. and offers bilingual and bicultural mental health services. And we also have a Central East Regional Recovery Center, which is a center for substance abuse recovery here in North Park. So as you can see, we have a wide range of programs. And one of the joys that I get in my job is promoting all of our services and programs throughout the community, and being able to speak to some of those challenges in the community, and with a variety of stakeholders. So some of our, I also do some fundraising for the organization. So I'm constantly interacting with donors, like I said, with policymakers and government officials, and then also with our faith-based communities.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Angel, for sharing all of that, both kind of your journey and what Episcopal Community Services does. Sounds like a lot of really like wraparound work. It's a really impactful way of serving the community. So thank you for sharing that. If you guys have, follow-up questions for Angel, keep them or send them in the chat, but we're going to move on to our next panelist. So we have time to hear from all of them before our Q&A. So Darlene, we're going to move on to you, and thank you for being here as well. I'll let Darlene share more, but she's our site coordinator with Jewish Family Service in San Diego. And without further ado, Darlene, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. It feels so good to be back. Yes, thank you so much for inviting me and my ex-classmates, which is really nice to have you all. So my name is Darlene. I was born and raised in Burundi, which is in East Africa, a very small country, but beautiful. So how did my career started? I have a background in business administration, and I started working in my country as an intern in a business incubator, which is in the nonprofit field. And it was really nice. And that was actually my momentous job opportunity, because I was working with youth, women, and college undergrads. And we were creating programs for economic empowerment for women and youth through entrepreneurship. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with my country, but like now we are like the first non-developed country, but there are not a lot of jobs opportunities, or like it's not easy to get jobs. So there's always a calling to private sectors to create jobs, and the best way is through entrepreneurship. So that is what I started doing. And then through my journey, I had an opportunity to meet one of my mentors, because he was working in UNDP. I was managing the UNDP project where we were promoting social cohesion through entrepreneurship, because during that time, it was in 2015, we had like a political crisis, and a lot of young people were involved in political parties, and it was not healthy. So it's not like here. So it was a lot of violence and all that. So we were kind of like driving them to focus on the entrepreneurship. So during that journey, when I was managing the project, my mentor talked to me about USD, because he graduated actually in the MAPJ. And then he was like, you know what, based on what like your passion, because my passion is economic empowerment and community development. He was like, you need to look into a USD. And I was like, okay, great. Let me just take a look at it. So, and then I looked it, and I was like, social innovation really resonates with what I want to do and my field. So that's how I got introduced to USC. And then I started, I came to the US. It wasn't my first time to leave away from my country, my family. So there was a lot of, I'd say lots of emotions, but a lot of open opportunities. There was like my brain kind of like stepped into okay, I am coming into a big world. Like there's lots of opportunities, lots of populations to serve. Like I was like, I was in know of like how there's so much diversity in serving the community. And then I was in a mood of learning. So I started learning. And through that, I had an opportunity to be a board fellow where I served at Social Advocate for Youth as a board fellow. That's when I got first introduced to the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I continued even in my current organization where I work. I am a Diversity and Belonging Council member. So yeah, and then I'll say like my first opportunity was to work in the immigration sector and field, which I am still learning a lot. There's a lots of things that surround it. I think my colleagues can agree with me. So, but it's really nice to keep learning from like the people I serve and seeing immigrants from different backgrounds and histories. That is it's for me, it's rewarding. So I didn't really, that was not my passion, like, okay, I want to be in the immigration sector. But then when I actually started, I'm going to thank to Misael. He was the one who talked to me about JFS first. So thank you to Misael. I, as an immigrant, I've learned and I'm still learning on a lot of challenges that they go through. So JFS, actually I'm going to the current job. And so now I am site coordinator. I started at JFS as a case manager, which I'm going to take an opportunity of sharing. Like as an immigrant and someone who didn't work for a long time in the US, I don't know, we go through a lot of challenges to get a job. And I think because even in my path, like in my country, I started as an intern, I came with an idea of like, with a mindset of I can start whatever, as long as I have a goal and I have a vision of where I want to be. So I started as a case manager, like helping immigrants to get access to the resources they need, whether it's medical, legal, or like if they need to be connected to their sponsors, like so stuff like that. And then now I am a site coordinator. So what do we do? So JFS has a lot of services. We do nutrition assistance, economic mobility, adults and family. We assist adults and families, older adults, and we have immigration and refugees services. So under the umbrella of immigration and refugee services, we have shelter operations and immigration services. In the shelter operations, that's when we come in. JFS operates the San Diego Rapid Response Network. So the San Diego Rapid Response Network it's a lot of nonprofits in San Diego who are in that network. So I'm gonna maybe give you a little bit of context. So the San Diego Network Rapid Response, give me a second. It's a coalition of human rights, service and faith organization attorneys, civic leaders and volunteers that monitors increased immigration enforcement activities in San Diego County. So in 2018, the Department of Homeland Security started releasing immigrants on the streets of San Diego from the border. So someone called the line and then was like, hey, we are seeing a lot of immigrants here on the street and they don't know where to go. And that's when we started. That's when the shelter started. And then all those organizations came back together and they were like, you know what? Let JFS operate the network. So this is how JFS started operating the shelter, the San Diego Network Response. Yeah, so how does my day look like? So Sometimes I get to be in touch with the border, like to know, okay, how many people are gonna come into? We receive over 200 immigrants per day. That is only JFS. And so we kind of get in touch with the border, like and then they let us know, okay, hey, today you're going to receive, we are expecting to have like 100 or 150. And then we'll make sure that we have transportation prepared for them. And then we'll drive them from the border, and then they come into our shelter, and we start the process of getting them in touch with their families, because most of them, they don't have access to network, or they don't have access to Wi-Fi or communication. And then we first start like coordinating their transport or their travel. And if they need any medical assistance, we will provide that. Some come with special legal cases or legal needs, then we'll provide the service. That's mainly what I do, and kind of like overseeing the operations at the shelter. Yeah, so
Darlene, I'm gonna pause right there. You're giving so much insight and information, and I know I have some experience at JFS too, and know what they do is so
great.
vast.
It's a lot.
So I think, well, thank you for sharing all of that and kind of your journey. I think the story of how you got there is really impactful too for some of us. I know there was a question actually from Zoe in the last room about like when you have all of these ideas and passions, how do you land on the one thing? And I think you spoke a little bit to that, and maybe we'll come back to that after we hear from Misael. So I want to give time to hear from our third panelist, and then we can dive into some questions and discussion. So save those thoughts and questions, and then we're gonna switch gears over to hear from Misael about what they do, and then we'll go into some question and answers. So thank you, Darlene and Misael.
Yeah, thanks, Arya, and it just brings good memories, Darlene, to hear about the operations. For one question, Daria, how long do I have? How much time do I have?
Let's go. We're at 1:46. Let's go like 5 to 7 minutes. Try to wrap up by 51, and then we can dive into questions and stuff.
Got it. Okay, copy. Thanks.
Thanks.
Well, just to be very straightforward, it was every time I get the question of how did you start your career? What was your momentous job opportunity? I say, honestly, I did not reflect about those questions or about my experience in the past, because every opportunity that I had, I would just take it and take it and take it and take it. And I realized that in a better position because of pay, because of experience, because of the people that I was surrounded by. And now that I think this question, I think that there was a common denominator, which is contributing or being of assistance to others. I was first, I would say, when I moved to the United States in 2010, summer of 2010, I started working in wineries, in restaurants, and I was very good at it. And I spent like 9-10 years working in the restaurant industry. I was a sous chef, and I traveled to Italy to do research and all this cool stuff, right? And I loved it. I actually started like a small catering business, which is completely unrelated, not completely unrelated, somehow unrelated to the work that I do now. And I say it not completely because there's always this aspect of interacting with people, connecting with people, speaking to them. If you don't think that you can relate to them, there are several topics and experiences that the humans go through, that we take advantage of those topics or those conversations, and we connect with them. I wanted to jump into the question of what is an advice or words of advice for graduate students. I did have one mentor, but I then started having several mentors. Some of them are still in the Kroc School, and one of them would be listen with compassion. Do not take things personal, like a job rejection, a grant denial, and etc. Reflect about yourself as much as you reflect about the world, right? So all of these advices and ideas and thoughts that I had from other people, from family, I put them together and I continued to take the opportunities. I transitioned from the restaurant industry, from working in high schools as a bilingual instructional assistant. Some of experiences at the Kroc that I had were thanks to the SOGs, the Student Opportunity Grants, that I had the opportunity to go to Colombia with youth in an area, developing area, and the experience, bringing the experience of working at the San Diego Rapid Response Network, first as a case manager lead, and then I transitioned. Bringing all these experiences together helped me find this other organization too that focused on immigration, on youth, and bridging resources, right? Which is USCRI, the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. And the program that I'm in right now is the Home Studies and Post-Release Services for Unaccompanied Children. And what we do is bridging the resources to infant and minors newcomers by providing educational, legal, mental, and medical resources and psychoeducation, as well as identifying child trafficking and some other issues, right? And just to finish, because I will answer your questions. Other programs that the USCRI has is children's services, where I'm in, residential care, refugee programs, trafficking services, legal programs, refugee health services, policy and advocacy, and there are some entities, international entities in El Salvador, Honduras, Kenya, and Mexico. USCRI is funded by the Office of Refugee Resettlement, so we're working directly with the ORR in obtaining that information from the population that we serve. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Misael. I love the way that you connected all of your experiences of like working in the restaurant industry to what you do now, and the lining of people. There's always, a way to serve and connect. So thank you all for sharing that, your kind of career journey thus far. I know you all kind of touched on this a little bit, but just to kind of give an overview to the folks in the room, and then kind of we can dive into questions. But I'm wondering if each of you can just kind of briefly, like no more than a minute, kind of just share what like a typical day looks like for you in your current role. Whoever wants to start can go first.
Yeah, I can go first. I don't really have a typical day. I try to start my day in the morning in the office, and then in the afternoons I try to take community partner meetings. That sometimes happens, sometimes doesn't. But anywhere throughout my day, I'm talking to so many different constituents. I don't get to spend as much time in our programs as I would like, in our client-facing services as I would like. But yeah, I just every day is different, and the job that I'm in requires nights and weekends to be available for events or for guest preaching opportunities and things like that. So it's a little bit of a cop-out, sorry.
That's okay. Misael or Darlene? Darlene, I saw your mouth moving.
Okay.
There you go.
I was telling Misael you can go first, but he's a gentleman. Maybe he wants me to go first. Okay, so I have like a set of things that needs to be done, but there's always like emergency. So for example, when a guest is maybe sick or does needs emergency services, I will be the one in touch with the hospital, or like calling or being in touch with the medical team. So but the things that I need to do is to make sure like I know how many people are gonna be released that day, and making sure that I am in touch with the transport company, like, hey, please make sure that you're going to be there at this time, and also coordinate with, because we have a team at the port, and the port of entry, we have also the team of case managers. So coordinate with all the team members, like the leads and the case managers, and to make sure that we are getting ready for them, or like we are availing all the resources that they need. Also being in touch with the partners, like depending on the services they need. So that's mainly, I will not call it a typical day. It depends on the needs of the day. Yes. Yeah.
Well, my role is the family support coordinator, and this job means that I get to work from home at least 50% of the time, and then work outside of home in another state, traveling to complete home visits, right? So when I'm at home, I do a lot of calls, monitoring, speaking with, when needed, CPS, law enforcement, completing reports, writing assessments, conducting case plans and follow-ups, and so on and so forth. When I'm traveling to another state, I've visited a few states so far. But when I'm traveling, I go to the families' houses, do an assessment, a tour of the home, do assessment, have interviews with the parents and the children, and then write a report after that. It has so many other things that is kind of not complex to explain, but there are so many things that we do on a daily basis. But that's basically it. Working from home, working outside, completing assessments, making reports, and so on.
Awesome. Thank you. And then just a reminder, if you guys have questions, feel free to unmute or raise your hand or send them in the chat. But a question that came up as actually I was listening to you all speak, and I know you were sent kind of these preview of questions, but I'm kind of hearing this thread, and it kind of came up in the last room of like getting to where you are now, and hearing all of your stories. I'm curious, kind of, did you think that this is the role that you would be in when you were in grad school? And if you could just like talk a little bit about that, and like the reflection on like where you are now, and if you thought that that's where you would be and wanted to be.
I'll start. I would have never thought that I'll be working in the immigration field. I would never have thought about that, because like as I told you, I started in the economic empowerment programs, which is still my passion. And I also, like, outside JFS, I am a member of an advisory board member of a small nonprofit called Growth Aspired People, where like we empower women in the community and we help them get access to mental health, or like counseling, or like the resources they might need for them to progress in life. So, but the immigration thing is really something I need to, I feel like it resonates with me, and it gives me a sense of like serving people who have like the same issues I got when I came here, or not the same issues, but even more, but like it resonates more with me. So yeah, that is my answer. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, thank you. It's more of a kind of like a reflection on where you are, and if that's where you thought you were going to be, as we're talking kind of about like thinking ahead to, you know, past grad school.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
hard to foresee, I think. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that.
Yeah, I can share. I don't think I ever thought I would have the position that I have, mostly because I think we kind of just made it up to fit some of the skills that I have and that I wanted to pursue. And thankfully, I had really supportive supervisor and a really supportive CEO who wanted me to grow professionally. And so we kind of, they actually allowed me to write my own job description that included my own title. And so I'm very, very thankful to ECS for that opportunity. But one of the things I will say is that I always knew that I wanted to work in a faith-based organization. And so I didn't necessarily know it was going to be an Episcopal organization, but I have grown to really value the values of the Episcopal Church and some of the social justice principles and inclusivity of the Episcopal Church. So I'm really thankful that through this job, I've been able to explore the Episcopal faith. But one of the things that I always also knew was that I really wanted to be in a position, in an organization, I should say, that really shared the same values that I had, and whose mission I could really stand behind. And so I feel very fortunate that I found that at Episcopal Community Services. And it wasn't anything like I didn't grow up Episcopalian, and I didn't actually even know about ECS while I was at the Kroc School. And so it just the way that life kind of presented opportunities and self-growth, I should say, really was what led me to where I am now. And when I came to California, I really wanted to get away from education, but I'm really thankful that I can still be around the education field without being an educator necessarily. So I like to say whenever we go to one of our Head Start sites, I get my fix of children for the couple of minutes that I'm there, and then I get to leave and leave the chaos behind. So I didn't, to answer your question, no, I never thought this would be where I would end up, but I'm happy I'm here.
Well, at least in my experience when I was in grad school, honestly, I didn't know. I didn't know that I wanted to do this. I didn't know that I was going to end up in this such great organization. I knew that I wanted to work with youth, and like I said earlier, it's if I work or if I'm doing something and there's something that really relates to my values and to the work that I want to do in the world, in my community, in the society. And if opportunity is presented, I will take it. If it's not presented, I will make the opportunity be and I will take it. I remember when I was doing the practicum in Colombia, I really liked the work that the organization Biblioseo was doing, that it was focusing on the youth and creating programs and creating businesses. And I said to myself, well, what if I apply to be a teacher or to be part of the organization? And I applied. I did not get the job, and that was fine, right? And now that I am working here with USCRI, I think that, well, the mindset is that I will take the most out of it. I will learn from each one of the people that I'm surrounded by, and that I meet around the region or the country. I get to meet a lot of people, and this is where I'm at right now. Now, I didn't know in the beginning, but now I am taking every opportunity presented. I got an interview, or was going to get an interview to apply as a social worker with the organization. So it's still on hold, but I said yes, let's do it. So that's where I'm heading.
Sorry, guys, my lights went off again. They're on an auto timer. Thank you all for answering that question as well. And kind of, I think, going off of that, like now that you are in this field that maybe you didn't quite anticipate, what would you say is kind of the most essential skill set needed for being an immigrant or community-based services?
I can go first. I think that the part of the communication with people, right? Communication, general, but communicating with people, and I think that this is why I said that we must be open to interacting and learning from others. There's one aspect and one skill and one aspect here of our work is that it's cultural awareness, cultural sensitivity, and the communication that we have with our clients, with the children, especially children that experienced trauma, experienced other situations in their home countries or in transition from country of origin to destination. And we must be cautious on how we express, how we say things, how we provide the education, and how we connect with the families. I think that being able to find ways to connect with them, to relate to them, so that there's trust and they can work with you and you can work with them. It has been super important in the work that we do. Since, like I said, we interact with them most of the time. So, yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I will add to what just Misael said, empathy. I think that is really a very important skill to have, because they don't necessarily have the same experience of life. Most of them have like a worse experience, and they come with a lot of lots of traumas, and we might not necessarily have like be a professional in like mental health, how to deal with those kind of issues, but be aware, like we like to call it in my work setting to be trauma-informed care. So these are like trainings that are very important in our organization. Like we have to take those trainings and to kind of like learn how to be in their shoes, even though like you don't necessarily have their experience. So yeah, that is what I can add to what Ms. said.
Well, yeah, one of the things that I appreciated the most about my time at the Kroc School was just, that training of looking at different social issues from all different types of perspectives, and knowing how to speak intelligently about them in different situations. And so sometimes, when I'm having conversations with policymakers and government officials about homelessness, it's going to look very different from when I'm having those same conversations with our faith-based communities. And that's going to look even more different from when I'm having conversations with our residents in our transitional housing facilities. And so, I have to use my toolbox of knowing everything that I know about homelessness, about the root causes of homelessness, about some of the solutions for homelessness, and even some of the advocacy or the legislation around homelessness, to really have an informed and well-rounded perspective on what those issues are. And it's not just homelessness. Like I said, we also work in the field of early childhood education, of mental health, of substance use disorder. And so, yeah, like Misael and Darlene were saying, it's just being able to communicate all of those things to different stakeholders. I think that is one of the things that I took away from the Kroc School, especially, and that I use pretty regularly in my life, in my career, I should say. Sorry.
Well, thank you all for sharing your thoughts on that. We have around a little over 5 minutes left if anyone has other questions you want to ask. But if not, I'll keep going. I think, well, just kind of two questions, two ways we could go with this. I'm going to ask this one. I think this type of work can sometimes be like emotionally taxing, especially when you're working with communities who are dealing with different challenges and traumas, as we were just talking about. So in that work, how do you, individually sustain yourself from kind of getting burnt out or, having that vicarious trauma?
Well, there are several ways that we go about this situation. At least within our team, there's a lot of communication We have meet weekly and we have supervision weekly. And I think it's important for us to, I think one of the most important aspects is communication again. It's because we share the experiences, we share the events during the home visits, we share the stories, and there's always support, right? There's always support. How the support looks like, it's, for example, we had a long day working with family and it was exhausting, mentally exhausting, emotionally exhausting. The supervisor would allow us to take an extra day off to rest, to decompress, right? Another way to do this is that I personally do. I do a lot of sports and especially power impact sports, and that really helps me a lot. I do a lot of reflection as well, and I started doing meditation, but then I stopped again. I know I should be back doing it, but it's a lot of reflection about my person, about my work, and and those would be like the main ones. We have a space. We are allowed space for ourselves to decompress and to feel humans.
I'll answer in two ways. One is for myself, is to communicate, like as Nisa was saying, but for me, it's communicating the feelings I'm having with my supervisor, or like building that community, I would say like a professional relationships, but that turns around like the work setting. Like, okay, I have this environment when I can come back and then share the experience I just had with maybe this specific family, and then talk about it, and then have the emotional support or like the advices or whatever. And then that, for me, that would be the end. Like that's how I deal with it. And second, outside work, I like to take walks. So I like walking in nature and along lakes. So that is therapeutic for me. So yeah, that's how I deal with it.
Yeah, my role is a little bit different, just because I'm not doing as much of the client-facing work, so anymore, I should say. But yeah, I think for me, what keeps me from burning out in a role like this is definitely staying connected to the mission of the organization, and staying really reflecting on that the work that I am doing is making a difference in the lives of the clients that we serve. Even though it doesn't feel like it a lot of times, because I'm more on the administrative side, or the the external facing side of things. But in order for an organization to function, everyone needs to be kind of rowing in the same direction. So that's what I kind of try to remind myself, and find those like little moments where I do get to interact with clients and our staff, to just really bring me back to the mission of the agency.
Thank you all for sharing that, both on a personal note and on a professional note. I think it's important to think about. We have about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to ask our panelists if you don't mind sharing your email in the chat if any of our attendees want to follow up, if you don't mind. And then we'll close maybe just like a couple words of advice for our graduate students as they take this in stride moving forward.
Yeah, not the only advice, but the advice I'll leave you with. Well, I guess I have two things for advice. The first is to just keep going. There's no straight line to any career, really, with the peace and justice. No one is like a manager of peace and justice anywhere. So just find your niche and just keep going. And I think Maisel was talking a little bit about, saying yes to every opportunity you get. So everyone's career path will look differently, and you'll see as in the next few years as your peers will be out in the field, and you can compare notes and see where everyone ends up. Everyone's path just will look different, and hopefully you're okay with that because of the degree that you're in. And then the second thing, and I'll just do a little plug, is to use the USD alumni resources. So I also chair the USD Pride alumni group. And so if you'll start receiving, those alumni notifications, but definitely it's a great resource. The network is pretty expansive. And so I encourage you to really get involved with some of those alumni affinity groups and really start that networking process as early as you can. And I know that I've seen, really great success from people finding jobs or just connections and networks. So those are the two pieces of advice I'll leave you with.
My first thing will be for me, like it's okay not to know like what you want exactly. But you need also to be open to learn and to communicate, or like to talk with people who might not even be in the things that you feel like you are interested in. And the second tool I usually use even now is to use informational interviews. Like start from the people you know. Like, for example, if you know someone who's in an organization that you're interested to know more about, just have that person maybe connect you with one of the executive, and use the sandiego.edu resource now that you have. I've noticed that people are very open to talk to students. And then I've realized that when you talk to someone, when you talk to one person, they will connect you to another person you don't even know, and then you will find your path. So you might find your path. So those are the two pieces also of advice I wanted to share. Yeah.
And
You got a quick 60 seconds and they're forcing us back.
I'm gonna read this. Reflect about yourself as much as you reflect about the world. And now, especially that we're in these programs, MAPJ, MASI, CMR, etc. We do a lot of things. We absorb so much information, but we're also humans. Reflect about yourself as much as you reflect about the world. Be genuinely kind and reach out for support always with an open eye and reciprocity. And the last word is just network, communicate.
Awesome. Thank you, Darlene, Angela, and Misael so much. Appreciate you all.
So just to recap, we will have you three introduce yourselves and share a little bit about your careers, about like 5-7 minutes, and then we'll open it up to the floor. And then I have a bunch of questions too, but otherwise we'll let the students ask. So who would like to go first?
I'm happy to go.
Okay, perfect. Christina.
Great. Well, hello everyone. I'm Christina Munoz. I'll just dive right in, but I'll share that I started my career in the family business. So my family makes cowboy boots in Mexico. So I started working there. I'm an industrial engineer. I would do like internal auditing and project management for the family business. And then I made probably one of the biggest decisions of my life, which was pursuing my master's in sustainability and social innovation. And then I did like a huge career shift that led me to work in the nonprofit industry for a few years. I had some years like full of, a lot of passion and hard work. I know what it's like. But yeah, so at the beginning, I think when I was super young, like working into my passion meant like volunteering with nonprofits that I cared about. And then it turned into my everyday job when I worked for a couple nonprofits in the Bay Area. Then I did a big career shift again, and now I work in corporate philanthropy. So I work for Dr. Bronner's now. I'm the philanthropic engagement project specialist. It's a super long title, but what that means is I'm relationship manager to a lot of organizations that we fund. So now I'm on the other side. I'm the funding side. So I get to send out fun emails saying that we're going to make a donation, whether it's product or money, doing site visits occasionally, tours to the factory. And yes, it's a little bit like Willy Wonka. I manage our product donation program, coordinate also. I'm really engaged and passionate about regenerative agriculture. So as you know, Dr. Bronner's has an agricultural supply chain that we source our oils from to make the soap. So I often attend conferences and speaking engagements or organize events in that space as well. And we also have a program that I love that we offer nonprofit trainings that are free for our grantees. And yeah, that's kind of like a day in my life now. And if you're not familiar with Dr. Bronner's, we are headquartered in Vista, in North County, San Diego, and we're like the top selling soap in America in the natural product space. So our soap is organic and fair trade, and we also now make chocolate. So yeah, that's my intro.
And a B Corp, right?
And we're a B Corp. We're also the top scoring B Corp in the world.
Amazing. Pioneers. Who would like to go next, Sienna or Tabitha? Tabitha, you're it.
Okay, I can go. Hi everyone. My name is Tabitha Naholi. I was born and raised in Nairobi, Kenya, but now I live in Atlanta. My career journey is, I guess, similar to Christina. So I did an undergrad. My undergrad was a double major in marketing and human resource management. My dad is a marketer. He owns his own marketing company. So I always thought that I was going to be the one taking over the business, but I was fascinated with the area of digital marketing. So I was fortunate enough to get my first internship in digital marketing at a nonprofit based in Atlanta. So they run a web-based leadership program for young leaders in developing countries. So I went through the program, and then when it was time for me to finish my undergrad, they were like, "Do you want to come and do an internship?" I said, "Of course, I would love to." So I came and did an internship, and I mainly used to do social media and managing the website, managing the password protected websites. And I did like what I did. I liked working with young leaders and exposing them to different opportunities and growing them as leaders because I was a young leader at the time. But I didn't really like marketing. So around the same time, just before the pandemic hit, I decided to move back home for a little bit. And when I was home, I had some time to reflect. And I remember I had conversations with my mom, who has changed her career as often as she needs to. So she's a firm believer, if the thing is no longer setting your soul on fire, change. Like, you don't have to be stuck to a job for life. And she has always taught us that you can have 5 careers in one life and you'll still be fine. So we were having conversations and she kept on saying, "I think you do really well in community development, like things to do with like social development." So at the time she had just she had gone back to school, done a degree in social transformation, and was getting her master's in sustainable waste management. And she was like, "I think you would be perfect." So I was like, okay, where do I even start? Like, which masters exist in like this space? So at the time, I had also gotten a job offer in Kenya to work for a social enterprise that works in sustainable energy. So what they mainly do is provide affordable biogas solutions to families in rural areas. So eradicating the use of firewood and kerosene and charcoal, with clean and sustainable energy through biogas. So I was doing their marketing again. So I was in love with what the mission of the organization, but I didn't like posting on social media. I felt like I was selling, and I don't like selling. So at the time, my mom was like, "I think you should go back to school and think what you need to do." So a little backstory also, I had started a nonprofit in 2018 in Kenya to mainly eradicate period poverty. So we work with menstruators, school-going menstruators, to give them access to affordable sanitary towels, and we train teenage mothers to make them. So while I was back home and I was running and growing my nonprofit, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I signed up for social entrepreneurship, 6 month social entrepreneurship class, and that's when I learned about design thinking. And I was like, this is like a field. This seems really cool. So when I decided in 2021 to do my master's, I was like, okay. I went to Google. I was like, Masters in Community Development. And funny enough, the Kroc School popped up and the Masters of Social Innovation popped up. And I read, I was like, this looks like me. So I applied. So that's how I guess I found Masters in Community Development. Yeah, I initially joined the school from a lens of a founder, like how do I grow my nonprofit? And then started learning that you can also be a founder, but there's also a lot of nonprofit work and social impact work that can be done in organizations. So I decided to stay in the US and work for a bit. And when I was looking for jobs initially, I wanted to work in corporate. I was like, I want to work in CSR. It's like nonprofits can never be me. Then I stumbled upon the YMCA, and so how YMCA's work is there's a lot of like different organizations throughout the world. So YUSA runs the associations in the US, and then every YMCA is very different. It's geared towards the community they work in. So they suit and solve the needs of the community that they're in. So I found the YMCA of Metropolitan Atlanta because I knew I wanted to move to Atlanta after finishing my master's. And it was a social impact manager. I'm like, that's perfect. Like I've learned social innovation. I would be great for the job. So went for the interviews, went till the final stage, and then I was passed on for an internal candidate. But the hiring manager and the recruiter really liked me. So they were like, the recruiter called me and told me, this is where you're supposed to be, and I will find for you a job. Like I'll find an opening that is suitable towards you. And then 3 jobs later, I eventually became the youth program support manager. And what that looks like is I help manage our grant funded programs. So I help manage our youth program. So after school, day camp, middle school, teen programming. And I also manage our community partnership. So how do we infuse and improve our programming, and how do we transform the YMCA from just traditionally being seen as babysitters to we're actually involved in a child's life from elementary, from even beyond, because we have an early learning programming. So from age 1 or age 2 till like they're adults. So we do have other membership programs that are geared towards older people, but I work in youth development. And yeah, what my day-to-day looks like is just helping our after-school directors, our direct delivery staff who are actually giving the programming, and providing them all the support that they need, bringing on community partners who will infuse our curriculums. And I now started venturing into the DEI world and global engagement. So because we are also run and managed by YUSA, they do offer trainings and programs for anyone to sign up. So I'm currently doing the Emerging Global Leaders Institute program, which is to teach you about global diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how do you bring on DEI programming into your association. You work on a local impact project. So because my passion is really in social impact and in infusing and helping communities create solutions to their own problems, because I believe that the solutions to the challenges they face lie within them. Since that's their lived experience, I can't come and tell them, this is what y'all need to do, because I don't live that day-to-day life. So I'm able to tap into that, but I also believe as a young change maker and someone who started a nonprofit when I was fairly young, I do believe that solutions lie with young people. So just making sure that they're also equipped and are being put in spaces where they're able to think and use. Right now, we're doing very small design thinking exercises, like how do you see a problem in a community? How do you create a solution? Whether it's, okay, you live next to a food desert, as simple as how do you run a food distribution? Yeah, so I guess things like that. And looking to grow in the role and continue molding it and shaping it into what I want it to become. I always said that as much as my title might be a youth program support manager, my goal is to shape and mold the role to fit me and sort of try and tap into my passions. Yeah, so that's what I do on a day-to-day, and looking forward to it growing and seeing where that goes.
Thank you, Tabitha. Sienna?
Well, thank you all so much for being here. And it's humbling to be with Christina and Tabitha because I deeply admire both of your work in period poverty, and then Dr. Bronner's is a favorite of mine. So really happy to be here with you all. My name is Sienna George. I was born and raised in Boise, Idaho, and kind of got my start in social impact when I was student body president at Boise State during my undergrad, which sounds kind of silly to say now, but I was able to work on a lot of kind of systemic, institutionalized challenges that our university was facing at the time. And that was kind of where my initial spark got started. I ended up joining a fellowship through the Stanford Design School, learning a lot about design thinking. And that program was really geared towards how do we basically equip students that are undergrad students to become change makers on their college campuses. So that really inspired me. And then I started getting more and more engaged with higher ed and thinking, wow, this is a really interesting space. What can I do here? How can I change this to better serve students' needs in the future? So as I was kind of working after I graduated in student-centered design projects, I had always kind of had in the back of my mind this interest in social entrepreneurship. So I was looking for a master's program that would kind of allow me to merge those interests. And I found the Masters of Social Innovation. And so while I went through the Massey program, I essentially was taking all my electives in the School of Leadership and Education Sciences, SOLS, and then merging it with kind of my social innovation, social entrepreneurship interests. So I studied kind of the intersection between social impact business models and the model of higher ed. When I got ready to graduate into the pandemic, I was super burnt out on higher ed, unfortunately, and just learning the history of it. It was rooted in a lot of things that I fundamentally just do not agree with, principle-wise. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to set that down for a little while. I'm going to take a break. So I moved back home to Boise, and I reached out to a founder of Idaho's first B Corp and B Corporation, and said, hey, I'm really interested in everything you all do and have done over the years. Here's kind of what I've been up to. And so they were a small marketing firm at the time that was pivoting into offering workshops and curriculum for folks in the social impact space. So I went to work for them, and that's kind of where I got kickstarted in the social entrepreneurship space. I spent all my time developing curriculum, developing new frameworks and tools for social entrepreneurship, and I started teaching. So I was able to kind of merge those past interests that I had, which was so much fun. And I still teach at local universities in Idaho today. So that has been a really big joy of mine over the years. And so I would say that was kind of what kickstarted me. And then after I left working there, I joined the team at a small tech startup that was serving small values-aligned businesses. And so I spent about 2 years there as their social impact strategist, went through the B Corp certification with them, really was working directly with community to build solutions that would divert shoppers away from mega retailers right to small businesses. And then, as sometimes happens at startups, the whole thing just went under. So that was kind of a shock and a big challenge for me that happened about a year ago. So this last year has been trying to go back inward, try to figure out what do I care most about? How do I keep kind of these interests that I have at the fore? And that has led me to work at a nonprofit ski resort area locally as a social impact strategist, and then also as a learning experience designer at Boise State. So I've been doing that for the last year. And as that kind of, all of those things were kind of contractually based. So I've had now some experiences with like different types of organizations and companies. I then chatted with my dear friend Peyton, who started the nonprofit that I'm now working at, Style Her Empowered. We go by she, and Peyton was awarded a CNN Heroes Award over the summer, and they were experiencing a really large kind of influx of interest in the organization, and she really needed some support of just what do we do with this? And there's a big voting structure that's behind that campaign as well. So I now work as the development and community engagement director for she. And my day-to-day is a lot of doing all the things. So it's a very small team. Peyton and I are here in the US, and then the rest of our team works in Togo, Africa. And our mission is really to empower girls and women through education and employment opportunities. And we also have some sustainability projects that we work on as well. So my day-to-day can look like everything from getting our newsletter and social media posts out about International Day of the Girl, which is today, which is awesome, to communicating with our donors and beginning to build donor flows so that those folks are really engaged with us and feel like they're a part of our community. So we're building kind of a big strategy around that. And then, of course, this super fun work around the CNN Heroes campaign and really trying to make the most of that time and amplifying our work in that way as well. So I would say I've had a very unique journey professionally and try to just stay really connected to my interests as best I can.
Yes, I think Tabitha's mom would be very happy with your multiple career changes.
So true.
I agree with Tabitha's mom 1,000% on that. Okay, Henner, Julius, Helene, Holly, do you have any questions? I have some questions, but this is your time. So feel free to unmute yourselves, chat in the chat box, ask these amazing panelists some questions. Well, I'll ask Sienna and Tabitha a question. Oh, Holly, you were muting. Go for it.
No, I was actually just going to apologize. I'm like, I just have to think on it for a second. But I love the stories. So it's been fascinating to hear their journeys. So sorry, no question yet. I'll be
Okay.
working.
A question that somebody asked, and I think Holly asked in our last panel, for our two Kroc School alumna, what do you wish you had done that you didn't do during your Kroc School time?
Start. I think the biggest thing for me, and I've actually talked recently to Bianca about this, was just capturing what I was learning as I was learning it and almost building kind of a collection of artifacts as I went. So anytime I had an experience, whether it was related to coursework or outside of the classroom, I wish I would have done a better job of documenting that for myself and really highlighting key challenges, how I overcame those things, what I learned, applications of what I was learning, so that once I got done, it was easier to reflect back and then begin to articulate that to potential employers or folks I was interested in connecting with. I also learned that you really have a unique identity when you're a grad student to basically talk to anybody you want to talk to. It's like a de-risked identity. I found in the professional world that really changed when I graduated. As soon as I had a professional title, people were a lot less willing to talk to me, which was super interesting because I'm a pretty active learner and I just want to connect with people to learn. But there was something about being a grad student that everybody was open to talking to me at that time. And I wish I would have talked to a lot more people, just to have candid conversations about how they got to where they were and ask them questions about what they wish they would have done differently. So I think that's an awesome question. Thanks for asking it.
For me, I agree with what Sienna said on, oh, Holly, did you want to go?
No, I was just going to ask if you guys could add also if there's anything. So I love knowing what you regret, not regret, but wish you had done more of, but also what was most powerful and helped you the most that you did do there. So we can come back to that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I can start with the second one. What was powerful was, so I'm a big planner. So I think as soon as I found the school and I researched and I was like, this is where I want to go, I knew what graduate assistantships I wanted to go for. I knew where I wanted to work. Like I was like design thinking, I was like the Changemaker Hub is where I have to find a space there somehow. So I knew that I would research the syllabus. I knew what courses I wanted to do, what electives I wanted to do. I was fortunate enough to work with JC Rivas, who at the time was the director of the Changemaker Hub. And when I was in school, I remember the second semester, I think the second semester, I wasn't finding any electives that I really liked. And I remember speaking to him about it and he was like, you can like create an independent project and like design your own class the way you want it to be. And he was like, what do you want to do? And we sat down and I was like, I want to have actual experience with a nonprofit that's doing the work that I'm interested in. And he partnered me up with Think Dignity, and I went as like a social entrepreneur intern, and I worked with them for 3 months, saw what they were doing, and I was able to like put together a project. Because at the time, I've always believed, and I think my final career will be a social impact consultant, because I do want to work with nonprofits to help them get from this level to the next level. So I wanted to see, what does that look like? Is that something that I like doing, or is that something that sounds good? So I like how I created and curated my experience. What I regret doing, or what I regret that I didn't get an experience to have, is because Massey was such an intense 9-month program. And I think the first semester I was doing like 13 unit or 13 credits, and the second semester was also as intense. I didn't enjoy being a grad student as much as I wish I should have. Like, just stopping and smelling the roses, you know? Sometimes like I'm at work, I'm like, I really wish I just had a class and like a free period where I would just take a nap. I don't think I got to enjoy San Diego as much as I possibly could have. But then again, for me, it was between going to school, going for the grad assistance, you know, going back home. I was always burnt out to spend time with people. So I wish I could go. If I would go back, I would just tell myself to slow down and smell the roses, because being, as Sienna said, being a grad student is very unique. One, because everyone wants to speak to you. I think something that I've learned is people will really want to share their story and help you figure out something. So anytime I sent someone a LinkedIn message, or like, yeah, we can do 15 minutes, and the 15 minutes would turn into an hour of them just sharing their story. But I wish I would have also just slowed down and been a grad student, like not being so hard on myself to grow up. So yeah, that's something that I think, if you can occasionally like take breaks and just smell the roses before you have to like look for out of office time and you have set hours. I would have definitely done a lot more of that. But take as many opportunities as you can. I believe that, you know, closed mouths don't get fed. Ask as many questions. If you're interested in learning or working with a certain professor, ask them how you can plug into what they're doing. I got to go to Rwanda for the social innovation practicum, which fortunately enough for us, because of COVID and the rules that were changing, we're able to do it just before graduation. So that was also different. So I would say try as much as possible to curate the experience for yourself. Grad school is what you make it. It's not like undergrad where classes are set for you, but I think if you are intentional enough to create for yourself the experience that you want, and just reach out to people that you think can help you align with the goals and the visions that you have, then, you know, you make more of that opportunity. So I don't regret the 9 months. I just wish I was more casual and just more chilled. Yeah.
Christina, how about you? Anything from your graduate school experience? You were in France, right? Where was your program?
Yeah, I did the Masters of Sustainability and Social Innovation at HEC Paris.
I hope you smelled the roses in Paris. Yeah.
I did. You know what? I was just thinking about that as you were speaking, Tabitha, that my program was 18 months. So I was only on campus for a year, and I actually loved it. I was looking for a program that was shorter. I didn't want to be in school for like 2-3 years. I was like excited to go back, you know, to like go back to the workforce after my master's. I don't know what I was thinking. Now I'm like, I should have done a 4-year program. But I really enjoyed it. I think it's been one of the happiest years in the past, you know, just years of my life. Meeting like-minded people who were my age, or maybe a little bit older, a little bit younger, but we were all there for like the same reasons. I'm really excited to learn, and I have no regrets about that year. I like squeezed every ounce of knowledge from my professors. Well, maybe the only thing I would have done differently is I would have written my master's thesis while I was still in school. Because I was so busy just enjoying being a student. I was like, I don't want to sit at the library and just write this thing. Can I just enjoy the rest of my year here in Paris? So I did that, but then I suffered because I had to finish my thesis after I graduated and when I was doing my internship. So my internship was part of the program and was part of the credits I had to complete to get my master's degree. And that was so hard. That was the hardest thing, like dealing with, now I had a job And now I had to, I was in a new city, new job, and still having to write my master's thesis. I connected with with the professor who was my supervisor virtually, but it was just the hardest thing. So if I could have done something different, I would have done it there, just, finish it before I left. That's the only thing.
Thank you. Okay, any more questions from our attendees? Ramaya, I see you joined us.
Yes, hello everyone. How are you?
Hello.
Hey. All right, Helene, you have a question?
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Helen. I am second year MAPJ, but I'm here because I really want to kind of like explore social impact sector, social entrepreneurship, because I worked in the peace building field back home in Burma, and even though I'm in the peace and justice program, like the trauma and everything, it's taken a toll on me. So I'm like, will I be able to do, work in this same sector for the rest of my life? Should I start exploring other things as well? And I found that social entrepreneurship, I find social entrepreneurship or social impact very fascinating, and kind of still, it still aligns with my own values. So I would love to hear kind of like and thoughts and tips and how to get started in the field in social impact sector. Thank you.
I can speak on it. Thank you for sharing, and I'm sorry for your trauma. So when I also was going to start my master's, I had dealt with a lot of secondary trauma because the pandemic was very pivotal for the work I did with my nonprofit. So I was going out for a lot of donations every single day, hearing people's stories, whether they've gone through a flood or they've gone through, different, what am I going to say? Different, gender-based violences, effects on them. So I was taking in a lot. And at the time I wasn't going for therapy. And so by the time I was going to start the program, I was very burnt out. I was like, I didn't want anything to do with my nonprofit. I remember telling my mom, we need to find an executive director because that thing is not going to be me doing it. I still run it now. But so the one thing that I did was I took the necessary break. I took being in the Kroc School as a break that I needed, but I was also very firm with what I wouldn't do again in that industry. So I still have a passion for period poverty, but I knew that I never want to be on the front line again. I don't want to be a direct delivery staff when it comes to hearing people's stories. I also joined therapy, so I've been going to therapy since 2021, just to make sure that I'm also checking myself and taking care of myself. What I would tell you is that to sit down, I guess, and write a plan. If you were to envision yourself working in the next year, where would you want to work? I think there's still ways that you can work in social social entrepreneurship and in nonprofits that still do peace building work, but you're not like the one in direct delivery. So whether it's supporting the people who are actually doing the work or building workshops, writing curriculums, looking for grants, sourcing, training people, being an advocate. So I think when you look at the different roles that are in peace building, what can you do that also detaches you from being directly involved in the trauma? And that's where I would say you would start. So look at different organizations that you want to work with, and then reach out to people who are also in this space. I know it's trying and it's triggering to always, go back and with the situation that's going on in Burma. But I still think that there's a way you can work in that field. Or also you can just pivot completely. I was like, I still do period poverty work, but my main day-to-day is youth development. So for me, I was like, how do I develop young leaders and help them be able to learn how to take care of themselves? So I did a trauma-informed care training, and I lead with a lot of intentionality. So when I'm working with our staff that are in direct delivery, making sure that they're also knowing that the children who come to us are coming with a different level of trauma. So whatever trainings you can do to make sure that you're also equipping and growing yourself. I always recommend trauma-informed care to everyone because it makes you see the world in a different way, and you're seeing the world with a different colored lens because of what you've gone through and what you've experienced. And I think trauma-informed care helps you learn that it's okay for you to also have gone through a different level of trauma, and how do you start healing yourself. Someone a few months ago said that those who bear scars must heal the wounded. So I do believe that everything that you go through in life is only to equip you for your purpose, and you're the only person who's equipped to work in the industry that you choose to work in because you're able to step into someone else's shoes. So it'll get better to a point where now you're able to use your trauma for your purpose. So it gets better. That's what I wanted to say.
Any more advice from Christina or Sienna about entering the social impact space?
I have a
yes, for Maya, go for it.
So I am interested in entering into the Fowler Business Concept Challenge that we have on campus here. And I wanted to know if you guys had any like tips on how to develop like a compelling story, because I know that pitch competitions usually are centered a lot around storytelling and just like capturing the audience's attention. So A, like advice on storytelling, and B, like some pitfalls I guess I could watch out for in developing like a business concept.
I don't want to feel like I'm talking a lot. But I did do the Fowler Global Social Innovation Challenge when I was at the Kroc School, and I think I won the USD campus finals, and then I went into the global finals, and I got second position, and I won Audience Choice Award. So I'm a big storyteller. I believe in the power of stories. I think stories give us a glimpse into a life that we might not be able to live. So my first thing would be learn how. If you know how to tell your story, it'll be very easy for you to tell the story of the social innovation that you're trying to pitch. So how that's worked for me is I'm very creative. I like coming up with different concepts, but people will always have an emotional connection to something that you tell them. So how I used to start my pitches is creating something that everyone can identify with. So whether it's emotions, we've all experienced fear, we've all experienced anger, we've all experienced anxiety. So once you're able to start the story in such a way that your audience can connect and see themselves in the story that you're telling, then you're able to form a connection with them. I did this course from IDEO. It's called Storytelling for Influence. So if you have the money and are able to do it, it's like a $600 course, and it really tells you how do you create the big picture, how do you create the three concepts. So once you decide what you're telling and the flow, it helps you be able to tell that flow. I was telling the story of period poverty to people who, one, if you're not a menstruator, then you've never experienced what it's like to have a period. Two, if you've never grown up in global poverty or you've never experienced lack, then you really don't know what that looks like. So I tried to figure out how do you identify concepts that everyone can relate to, because you want your audience to go on a journey with you. So start off in a way that captures their emotion, but also keep that emotional thread, but don't tell a sad story the whole time. So how do you tell an empowering story like your persona is going through this and this is what your persona is facing, but with my social innovation that I'm creating, the persona is able to see themselves as a hero in the story. And you and I'm open to speaking to you more and workshopping and giving you different tips. I'd also say once you create your story, tell it to as many people as possible. Keep on improving on it, building on it. So by the time you're getting to that stage, you're able to tell the story. The difficult part for me was because I knew how to tell the story of the problem and the solution really well. Getting a way to tell the number story was a little difficult. So tap into people who have more of a logical brain and they see things more through numbers, and they're able to help you infuse, because at the end of the day, you have to say that your social innovation is sustainable. Otherwise, you have a really great story, but why would we fund you? So learn how to tell that number story. But I think once you have the big concept and what you want to communicate, and figure out when people listen to the story, I want them to leave feeling empowered, passionate, and like they can take action. And taking action is either donating to us or voting for me so that I can be able to advance to the next stage. So I forgot the second question, but that's what I would say about storytelling. And also believe in yourself. At the end of the day, you are the subject matter for the innovation that you're creating. And if you believe in yourself and you're confident, then people will be able to see as you tell your story and as you share your passion. Passion really shines through. So if you're passionate about something, people will buy into your passion. So think of a social innovation that sets your soul on fire, something that you can do beyond just the competition. Then people will be able to see your authenticity since it shines through.
I'd like to add something, if that's okay. Especially for social innovation challenges, since you're likely going to pick an issue that you're wanting to solve with the business that you're pitching. Just keep in mind like ethical storytelling and that you're not using a story of a constituent or a special group in an unethical way or to be exploitative of that story. We try to reinforce this with all of our grantees, whenever we see something, like I sometimes cringe when I see some campaigns or materials that go out there. So I just have like a key question for you to keep in mind as you're building your story. How do you ensure that everyone feels powerful? So whether it's the person that you're talking about or the people that you're talking to, make sure that you're sharing that story in a way that is honoring their power, their dignity, and their autonomy. That's all.
Love that. I love everything that you all have shared. I just dropped something that was really helpful to me in thinking that I still use today when thinking about solutioning. I would just kind of add to this as well that I think really understanding who you're aiming to partner with or serve, really understanding their needs first. So making sure that you understand the problem. And that's why I love the impact gaps canvas, is really understanding the problem that exists and then the solutions that have already been tried and figuring out where you fit in that. I think one of the kind of pitfalls of a lot of these pitches, and I've judged a few of them in past years, is that oftentimes speakers assume that that they know that everybody knows what you're talking about already. So they already, speakers will assume that folks already understand the problem, but making sure that you frame the problem, frame it from a really user-centered, community-centered perspective, and making sure you're doing that in an ethical way, I think is super important. And then I think also, I just use a lot of resources on TED Talks and watching a lot of TED Talks and finding the TED Talks that inspire you and why, like going back and rewatching them, understanding what did that person do that was so compelling? Why do I remember that story even weeks or months or years later? So finding the storytellers that you resonate with and learning from them as well, I think can be really helpful.
Thank you guys so much. I have a whole sheet, so thank you.
Okay, we have about 10 minutes left, so probably time for 2 questions. I'll pause for your brains to think.
Yeah, I have a question for all 3 of you. Hi, everyone. My name is Haner Abdon. My pronouns are he, him, his. For all the nonprofits and organizations and corporations, B Corps that you all work for, where did all the funding sources come from? And what kind of financial challenges did you and your organization had to go through in order to come on top?
Yeah, I can start. So Dr. Bronner's donates at least 30% of our profits. So our giving goes through the company, and we also have Dr. Bronner's Family Foundation, through which we fund migrant justice initiatives only. But that's our main engine for change. So the grants we give, and we also have an impact investment fund. These are invitation only. So we really dive deep into community connections, really getting to know what's needed in San Diego, in the US, within the issue area that we're trying to fund. And then we allocate resources there. Because it's a family-owned business, the Bronner family they're still very engaged in our operations, and they're very, very connected to our giving. So they are the ones who ultimately guide our giving decisions. But yeah, it basically comes from, customers go buy soap, and then you can be confident that, 30% of those profits go to the organizations that we fund every year.
Thank you.
At Styler Empowered, we have kind of an interesting business model. We do rely on traditional philanthropy, grants, and individual donations, as most of our funding right now is a nonprofit. But then we also have social enterprise activities as well. So we work with brands and actually create products for them with the women seamstresses that we employ in Togo. So they will make all of those products, and then they're sold oftentimes here in the US. But our female seamstresses also work on our She uniform that grows, and it's a uniform that's designed to grow up to 6 sizes with the girls as they go through school. And so those are also kind of products like that. We also have a reusable menstrual pad as well, and we're working on a biodegradable one. Those are products that we hope to sell in the future, or have kind of a licensing fee for those sorts of designs as well.
So I guess I'll answer it. At the YMCA, we have a hybrid funding model. So one, we get grants. So either if it's government grants or grants from really big foundations, or funding from our corporate partners, or individual giving. Because the YMCA has been in existence for a long time, it's easy for them to fundraise in that way. But we also are a membership-based organization. So families that are able to afford will pay for membership, either to use the gym or to do our programming. So that's how the YMCA is funded. For my nonprofit, it's a combination of funding from donors, so small family foundations or individual giving. Sometimes we do crowdfunding campaigns, but I realized that that's not really as sustainable. So I moved into social enterprise. Also learned that the people I'm working with, are not able to afford the pads that we sell. So how do you market to other people who are going to buy the pads for people? Like you have a user and a consumer. So your consumer is the person who's able to buy the product, but your user is someone else who's not able to afford it. So that's how one of the ways that we fund beyond looking for grants and donations. And then we also launched a product. So we launched an affirmation card deck for different menstruators, so anyone can use it. So we're trying to see how can we also tap into social enterprises, and how do we get products and create products that we can sell to fund the main work that we do. So still learning, still growing, but yeah, it's a journey.
Thank you. Okay, Julius, we have 5 minutes, so last question.
Thank you so much, Hilary, and our good presenters. Mine, I think I'll move from what Gren has said. I just want to see or hear from experience from the team, because I don't know, maybe we may start owning Joe one day. How do you navigate between the funders, managing your interests as your mandate, and the interests of funders, the independence in it? That's the main reason for this question, because I know people, even these funders, have their own agendas. Do they impact your agendas, or there's some conflicts, or is that independence, is it there? That's what I would wish to know in how you have been navigating through managing these interests.
I can start. Or Tabitha, sorry, were you gonna go?
You can go ahead.
Yeah, well, as funders, I will share that Dr. Bronner's has a very progressive and community-centric approach to funding. But I hear about other things that happen in the philanthropy space, and there's a lot of mission creep. So often funders have very restricted funds available for nonprofits, and then you're a nonprofit and you find yourself applying for grants, and then you end up changing your mission or your program just because you need the money. Dr. Bronner's gives unrestricted funds, so we just give the money and we let organizations use it for whatever it is. We know that there's admin costs. We know that you need to pay salaries. We know that sometimes it'll go to pay for a system you need to implement. So we don't do restricted funding. We also have a sponsorship program that is a little bit more transactional, but it works for some organizations when there's a very clear package. Maybe it's an event, we give some money in exchange for some promotional benefits. So I also want to share that. That's a very popular program. A lot of nonprofits have that. It's easy for funders and corporations to just like plug in that way. So we do both, but it's messy out there. I will say that. Just to be fully transparent. We do our best to practice trust-based philanthropy and just give the organization the whole, belief and trust that they know what they're doing better than we do. We are not doing the work that nonprofits are doing. We are facilitating and passing capital through them so it can get to the people who need it.
When I first started out my nonprofit and people wanted to fund me, I was just happy to get money. I was like, I didn't care where it came from. I was just really happy to get money. So I did go through experiences where it was when I was in the middle of the grant and then I'm like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this because this is something that's serving the funder, or working with funders who are more numbers driven versus impact driven. So they want you to do work that's pushing out numbers, or they want you to communicate and sell in a way that's unethical. So I had to take a step back and really go back to my mission and why I'm doing what I'm doing, and be very firm in that I will not take money from X and Y type of funds. So just the same way, like you would write a list of what you want in a job or what you want in an apartment, I was like, this is nice to have. If it's not coming with this, and I'm not doing it, so I don't look for, I only take unrestricted funding now. But that meant that for this year that we're currently in, I had to self-fund my nonprofit. So that was a huge sacrifice, but that meant that I was able to create and set systems and develop systems and put systems in place that when big funding comes, I already can tell you, this is what we've done by ourselves without any funding. So we've seen that this model works. And if you're coming to fund us, then you need to trust me and trust what I'm doing and trust in my vision as a founder. I'm also a firm believer in what's meant for me will find me and my people will find me. So not trying to align or create a program just so that I can fit into a specific type of funding. But it does come with a lot of sacrifice. Sometimes I'm like, I wish I had that money, but I'm going to pay people salaries, and I haven't taken a salary from my nonprofit in a long time. But I knew that if I take a step back now and I use this time as our building year and our foundation year of setting in places, like we won't do this if people come and they want. So we also, sometimes people will come and tell you, we want a marketing campaign that looks like this, where your constituents are being put in a position of, it's just really degrading, so that the funder can go and communicate and say, oh yeah, we work with these people in Kenya and look at them, like they're so impoverished and now with our money they're here. So also knowing your values and what you stand for as a founder, it's easy for you to mesh your values into your nonprofit. So I was very clear, and these are the values of the nonprofit, and just making sure that I attract the people that are also buying into our values. So it comes with a lot of sacrifice, but then I think it's worth it in the end. Yeah.
Any last thoughts, Sienna?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I think being very clear about your values and your areas of impact, and either aligning those with the funding sources that you're seeking, or making sure that you're staying true to them when funders may approach you or you're receiving funding from others, is really important. So I think that's already been shared.
And then make sure everybody reads the quote Christina just dropped. I really like that a lot. I have to remind myself that on the daily. But panelists, thank you so much for your time. If you're